Recording in progress.
Precisa ativar o mic, Silvia.
Olá a todos.
Hello there, everyone. I have to say that I am very happy to have you in this meeting, and I welcome everyone on behalf of the Federal University of São Paulo and our Center for Education Research and Outreach in Social Environmental Health. We understand that being alive today is in itself a sign of victory, but living in such contradictory times as these days also drives us to search for better quality of life for everyone and not just for a few. Therefore, as part of our personal freedoms, we will democratically defend health for everyone and for everyone in our society in general, given its different needs, possibilities, and of everything that science, through progress, scientific progress, has shown to us in terms of healthy alternatives. A living science and constant dialogue with the world, a world that is ever changing. To be here in this university enables us to teach and learn at the same time as we take ownership of the needs entailed from reality. I would also like to thank our readers and Professor Nelson Savio Rayana Quintão, and also Professors Odair Aguiar and Fernando Kenker, who are present here with us today, the directors of our campus in the Santista Baixada, and everyone from our social work group for the unconditional support given to our initiatives. The challenges that we have faced also bring with them the commitment of never staying silent. So this is why we are here trying to maintain our coherence and responsibility for the present and the future. In the words of our colleagues from the NAPSA team, Castelo Branco and Rodriguez, and I would like to thank them immensely for their dedication as people who study, work, and also do advocacy work in the areas of the environment, health, and society. We can see that there are gaps to be filled and issues to be solved, given the consequences of pollution, chemical contamination, and environmental accidents, specifically the ones involving the poorer parts of our population with very few resources and with very little to protect them when it comes to having their rights safeguarded. We wish to have a healthy and fair society, and we work in this direction together with our team of professionals, Cristiane, Eliana, and Fernando, and also our interns, Gabriela, Giovanna, Leandra, and Rosangela. We are at the service of society, and we are looking at developing not only cooperation efforts, but we are also trying to improve the quality of what we do and the areas where we live. So this is why we think it is very important to have here with us the advocacies for the World Alliance for a Mercury-Free Dentistry, Dr. Charlie Brown, the General Coordinator, Maria Isabel Carcama is the Coordinator for Latin America, and Dr. Graham Monroe Hall, who chairs the working group on training and transition for the World Alliance for a mercury-free dentistry. Also, Congressman Vicente da Silva Vicentinho for his attention and presence actually in such an important cause presented to us by the Minamata Convention, which is the control and elimination of mercury amalgams. The director of the Department of Environmental, Worker Health, and also of Health Surveillance Programs, Dr. Daniela Boazzi Hofs and Dr. Nicole M. Rodriguez Jose, General Coordinator for Oral Health in the Department of Family Health at the Ministry of Health, who offered to be here with us today, understanding how serious this subject is and the urgent attention it requires. They're very much open to establishing dialogue, which is so needed for the construction of bridges and solutions. We have many needs to address, and given our responsibilities as civil servants, we are here to fulfill our commitment. We understand that this cannot be an isolated movement, a movement of one single organization. We need everyone and every force in our society who ethically understand life and the benefits of having an ethical life. Ethics based on cooperation. So this is why I'd like to thank the partners present here today from both from Brazil and abroad. I have to say that you honor us with your presence and cooperation. I'd also like to thank some of the partnering associations involved in the organization of this meeting, such as the Association to Combat Pollutants, the Association for Social and Environmental Health, the Association for Environmental Health called Taxisfera, and also the Environmentalist Front of the Santista Baixada Santista, and all of the national institutions supporting this cause, the Brazilian Forum of NGOs and Social Movements, the Citizenship Forum of Santos, National Forum of the Committees for Watersheds in Brazil, the Brazilian Network of Environmental Education, Movement Against Aggressions to Nature, EcoFault Citizenship, Sustainability and Ecology, the Association of People Exposed and exposed to metallic mercury, Brazilian Association of People Exposed to Asbestos, the Popular Forum for Nature, Brazilian Institute of Environmental Protection, the Social, Environmental and Cultural Institute, Fisherman Village, the Verde America Collectivity, the Green Alternative Collectivity, the Union of the Bank Workers, Union of the Lawyers of the State of São Paulo, the Union of Metallurgy Plant Workers of the Baixada Santista, Union of Workers of the Transportation Business, Zero Waste Santos Association, the Agua Viva Association, also the Cultural Association Zé Martí from the Baixada Santista, the Solidarity Economics Forum of the Baixada Santista, the Brazilian Association of Lawyers for Democracy, also the Araucaria Association for the Defense of the Environment, and the Group for Studies and Education on the Environment. International institutions are here with us today. World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry, International Pollutants Elimination Network, Mercury Policy Project, RAPAL Uruguay, Latin American Center for Environmental Health, the Center for the Analysis and Action in Toxicants and its Alternatives, and also the Sustainable Development Network. We see this interaction as a privilege and a true opportunity to share our knowledge and experience that we have been putting to use in the promotion of health. We also believe that we have to think and act globally, and we are always trying to think about thoughts that unite people instead of tearing them apart, so that we can overcome the differences that we have, and using a technical scientific approach. And as has said also our eternal professor, Edgar Morin, let us also think about the critical line of thinking that has been used as a basis for a number of academic and professional research, historical materialism and dialectics, which have contributed so much for the development of knowledge and perspective of our students and professionals working with political economy and social historical process. When it comes to the environment, health, and society, we have to have a broader perspective, an integrated perspective. We understand that our actions affect our lives, life on this planet, and this is why we are here to discuss different topics, and particularly the issue of mercury. When I speak about mercury, we also think about pollution, contamination, and exposure to chemicals, many things that actually affect our societies and how much we have to think about our autonomy and our ability to build and rebuild from our reality and life experiences. The social determining factors for health, human exposure, and the exposure of nature to hazardous agents, movement of chemicals in the environment, in our bodies and in society has been a focus of our attention and interventions since 2010, when we first initiated the activities of our center called NAPSA. In this meeting from 2013 to the current context of Mercury Amálgama in Brazil 2021, we intend to look at the developments in this issue and think about it in collective and cooperative terms so that we can overcome the dilemmas in which we are facing today, and in an ethical way. The idea is to preserve lives so that we can ultimately have a better future for everyone. Our constant search for transformation aims at diminishing social differences that so dramatically affect us today. And citing Paulo Freire in the year that we're celebrating his 100th birthday, we are sure that true discipline does not exist in stagnation, on the silence of those who are silent, but actually on the noise of those who never rest. And considering all of that, we would like to very much count on you, and let me with that thank you for being here. So before I yield the floor to Professor Odair Aguiar, the director of our center, let me also talk a little about some housekeeping rules. Let me remind everyone that this meeting will be recorded because we mean to document everything that is said here. Because your participation by voice or video means that you will allow us to use your image. Let me also thank those of you who offered to be here to share your knowledge with us. And let it be known that this will be used to serve as input in numerous discussions. And to make sure that we have proper conversation, we will obviously try and get everyone to stick to the time allotted to their presentations. Let me now yield the floor to Professor Odair Aguiar, director of our campus for the Federal University of São Paulo in the Baixada Santista. Good afternoon, Professor Silvia. I think that you can't see me yet, can you? I don't think my camera is on at this point. No, we can't see you yet, Professor. Well, I'm looking at this here, and it says that you are not allowing me to actually turn my camera on. Oh, okay, just give me a second. Can you please try turning your camera on now? Okay, now it is working. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Silvia. So let me with that. Thank you also. I am very honored to be here with you today, opening this meeting. So let me start by acknowledging the Center for Research and Outreach coordinated by Professor Silvia Tangel. Let me also greet the head of our Institute for Health and Society. Let me also greet the authorities present here today, Dr. Charlie Brown, Dr. Marisa Del Carcamo, Dr. Amy, everyone from the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. Let me also greet the Ministry of Health, more specifically, Dr. Daniela Ropes and Dr. Nicole. Let me also greet Congressman Vicente Paulo da Silva. And let me also thank everyone of the partnering institutions and international associations and Brazilian associations as well, and collectivities, unions, and associations present here with us today. Let me start by greeting everyone and the organizers more specifically for having set up this meeting, which is actually a most welcome meeting in a moment in which our planet is facing one of its most difficult challenges, which is to keep alive. The Earth is suffocating in us and crying out for help. This is why more than ever, agreements, conventions, and protocols and other instruments and initiatives have to be revisited and even extended, I would say. What we do in this planet is destroying our very home, our living conditions, and also the environment in which other living beings also live. So I have to say that as the director of this campus, I'm very happy to see many of our schools now gathered together to discuss the Minamata Convention on the uses of mercury, which is so harmful to the health of men and the environment. I know that you're going to focus on mercury used in dentistry. It is a duty of public universities to be involved in relevant matters in the social environmental arena, providing support to other relevant partners and to engage in discussions that will ultimately result in public policies to control, manage, and oftentimes even ban substances that are hazardous to human beings. So again, I have to say that our doors are constantly open, the doors of our university, to any one of the institutions present here today, and government as well, as represented by the Ministry of Health, and everybody else interested in having a world that is mercury-free. So it is a pleasure for the Federal University of São Paulo to be here today with you, and in this meeting, participating as a fundamental player in this partnership, so that we can, by the way, can you still hear me there? Yes, we can hear you, sir. Oh, okay. So I would like to wish everyone a most fruitful meeting, and the Federal University of São Paulo, again, as I said earlier, is very much open to discussing the subjects pertaining to this meeting. And we're here also to organize future meetings if needed. So thank you everyone for being here with us today. Thank you, Professor Odair. So let me now invite to the floor for his welcoming remarks, Professor Fernando Sfer-Kinker, Academic Director of the Health and Society Institute at the Federal University of São Paulo in the Baixada Santista. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of Professor Sylvia and of our group at NAPSA, let me greet all of you who were present here today, more specifically our national and international guests who are here with us today, and who will certainly make sure that we have an extremely fruitful discussion of this subject. Let me also mention that I am honored to have the Federal University of São Paulo hosting such an important meeting that actually gathers together two very important areas which were historically separated. And more specifically, I'm talking about the environment and health. They were separated precisely for the reasons that Sylvia was describing here earlier, because we have this somewhat Cartesian, Western tendency of splitting things and basically, developing, specialization in ever, smaller and more specific areas. And specifically, as you look at health as something that is needed so that we can drive ourselves, and which is also dependent on everything that surrounds us. So in fact, health and the environment, they can only be separated artificially. So it is very important that we have this discussion here, that we actually reinforce the points related to this subject, specifically given the fact that this is, about a practice in the realm of healthcare, such, an important a line of work, which is dentistry. And it is very important, I think, that we engage in discussions about it today, because with that, we can only have a broader perspective on matters pertaining to health, and more specifically, those of us here who live in the Baixada Santista area, and we have our programs on health and society, and a number of other courses delivered in our health programs. I have to say that we are honored for hosting this discussion, and I truly hope that this discussions, or the discussions that we will have today, should strengthen movements here in Brazil and people working on this subject, so that it can be as strong as it is today, as other movements are, movements here in Brazil that are connecting health and the environment. So once again, let me congratulate the team from the NAPSA, also our dear guest speakers, and our friends from the IT department who are here lending a hand, and everyone who ultimately helped in the organization of this meeting. I wish you all a great meeting. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you very much, Professor Fernando. I have to say that it is always a thrill to listen to our colleagues, people who have been with us, standing shoulder to shoulder in many, struggles, and to see, how much agreement we have among us. So let me now call Dr. Maria Isabel Carcamo, an ecologist, researcher, and writer, and she's also the coordinator of the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry in Latin America, for your welcoming remarks, if you could please. Dr. Carcamo.
Boa tarde a todos y a todas. Muito obrigado.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for having invited me to be here in this seminar.
Now I'm going to turn into English. Can you please put the presentation? Can anyone, because I have a presentation, or is it not going to be? I sent a presentation.
One second, please, Maria.
Pardon?
One second, please.
Okay, that's okay. Sorry. Anyway, I could start talking anyway, because the time goes fast. What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about the World Alliance, then a little bit of the Minamata Convention, and then the situation in Latin America in relation to Minamata Convention. Can I? No? Should I wait for the? Okay. Yes. Thank you. Can you go to the first slides, please? Can you go to the other one? Okay, this is about the World Alliance. No, before the other one, please. This is the World Alliance for Mercury Free. It's a coalition of consumer, dental, and environmental organizations working together to phase out the amalgam use, with 11 region offices throughout the world and technical expertise in dentistry, environment, and policy, working to implement the Minamata Convention's amalgam phase-down measure. It worked with government, decision makers, and organizations to phase down amalgam use in every region. This is one of the group of our colleagues all around the world. Can you go to the other one? This is a little bit of the story, the history of Minamata, why Minamata Convention on Mercury. Is named after the Japanese city of Minamata, which experienced a severe decades-long incident of mercury poisoning after industrial wastewater from chemical factory was discharged into Minamata Bay. That's why it took the name, yes? The mercury-contaminated fish living in Minamata Bay. People ate the fish, were themselves contaminated, and became ill. And the objective of the Minamata Convention is to protect the human health and the environment from anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury compounds. Can you go into the other one, please? The history of the Minamata Convention, this was agreed in Geneva, January 2013, after many 5 intergovernmental negotiations, and it took a long time, but at the end, it was agreed in January 2013. And it was adopted the same year in Japan. And in 2017, entered into force. And up to now, there are 123 countries have deposited their instrument of ratification successfully. That means that they have to comply with the Minamata Convention. The other one, please. As you can see here is the rural region. The protection of human health is at the core of the Minamata Convention. And the rural region played a very important role during the negotiation of the convention, promoted and worked very hard for the Article 16. and that means health aspects. Next one. What happened around the rural region? Most of the countries have already signed and ratified the treaty. Uruguay ratified in September 2014, and Brazil ratified in August 2017. And countries that have actions are Cuba, El Salvador, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Suriname. And Venezuela has signed but has not ratified yet. The next one. This is global dental mercury, the use of it. And this is quite interesting. This picture, you can see, was the information we have here is from the 2015. And if you, as you can see, from 2005, we have 20, these are tons, yes? And as you can see, little by little, very little, but anyway, there is less use of mercury in dental. And if you can see in the graphic, dental amalgam, it uses 18%. That's quite a lot if you take into consideration, for instance, batteries, yes, or electrical and electronic devices. So even though we are using less mercury as years go on, but still it's quite high, the amount of mercury used in dental amalgam. The other one, please. This is another graphic. The estimated dental mercury consumption by geographic regions. Our region is the purple one that is used 4%. Again, it's quite a lot. Of course, we cannot compare with the other one. I think we have to compare just with ourselves, but it's quite a lot. The other one. Dental amalgam releases to the environment through the air, water, and land. After amalgam enters the environment, certain microorganisms can change its elemental mercury into methyl mercury, a highly toxic form of mercury that builds up in fish, shellfish, and people that eat fish. Methyl mercury can damage children's developing brain and nervous system even before they are born. That's why it's so important to get rid of dental amalgams. Next one. What happened with the country work towards mercury-free dentistry? Countries of the world adopted the Minamata Convention and included a provision addressing the need to shift from amalgam to non-toxic alternatives. Countries are paying close attention to how to reduce or end the use of amalgam, 50% of mercury. Some countries are partially phasing out amalgam use. Other countries, for example, Brazil's neighbor, Suriname, are phasing out amalgam use entirely. And here I am going to point out something very important that is happening in Uruguay. That is the country where I live. In March 2021, the School of Dentistry from the University of Republic of Uruguay agreed to withdraw dental amalgam from the curriculum programs in theoretical, clinical, and the use of any dental form. I think this is very important because it's like turning off the tap. If you turn off the tap, no more water will come. And if you do not teach dental amalgam in any use, a student would not know how to use it. And that's the best way to stop using dental amalgam. Next one. This is just an example of a country of different parts of the world that they have discouraged or restrict amalgam. in vulnerable population. Yes, Norway, Sweden. I'm not going to go through all of them. You just can have a look at it. But in all those countries, is very little use, or at least not in children or pregnant women. Next one. The fourth meeting of Conference of the Party this coming is going to be virtual from...
O nosso quarto encontro será feito virtualmente na próxima semana de novembro, e nós estamos muito felizes. Teremos mais um outro que será conduzido no primeiro trimestre de 2022 na Indonésia. E o nosso objetivo é, de fato, eliminar a utilização do amálgama oncológico. A União Europeia e a região da África propuseram fazer uma emenda a esse tratado para incluir a eliminação do amálgama odontológico especificamente para crianças, gestantes, lactentes e durante um período específico. E nós temos propostas específicas que estão sendo consideradas para serem discutidas nessa conferência entre as partes. E nós, de fato,
discussed and accepted by the rest of the countries. Next one. What happened? Looking ahead, we have dental mercury contamination is significant. 10% of the global mercury consumption is coming from dental amalgam. On the other hand, Minamata Convention driven interest in pricing down dental amalgam use. And the last one, and the most important one, mercury-free dental restoration are available, affordable, and help to preserve tooth. So we just have to apply to this. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm ready for questions if there are at the end.
Queremos agradecer muito a participação.
We would like to thank the participation of Dr. Maria Isabel Carcamo, who helped us to understand what is the current situation, and which is a very good opportunity for us to understand what is the status of this topic. And we will obviously try to make the most here of this contact and to clarify and have as many clarifications as possible. And we will post on the chat box the declaration that was put together by the civil society that's going to be available at the chat box, and that will be presented throughout this event. I would like to thank you all for having taken part in this opening session. And now we would like to just move on to the next session. And again, I'd like to reinforce that it's a pleasure for me to host you all here, but I'm also the timekeeper. So I will make sure that those of you who are speaking will have 5 minutes to end. So thank you, Professor Odair, Professor Fernando, Professor Maria Isabel, and I kindly invite you to remain with us. And now we shall move to the second part of our event. So we will have Jeffer Castelo Branco, Dr. Charlie Bao, Dr. Graham, and Dr. Daniela Nicole, and as well as State Representative Vicente. So now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Jeffer Castelo Branco, who's a PhD student and is a researcher from NECTAR, and he will present the COP4 from the Minamata Convention until the elimination of dental mercury in Brazil. So he was a student, he was a master student, and he's a PhD student, and we're very proud to have him with us. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Sylvia. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk a little bit about the mercury. And after a while, we have been finally dedicating some time to this very important topic after a very intensive use of mercury in our society. I've prepared the presentation. I'll try to share my screen now. And I hope you can see that. So thank you very much once again. And my intent here is to present to you what we've been study in this nuclei of studies and material studies, and to let you know what is the Brazilian stance at COP4, the opinions and the attitudes that the countries have been taking at COP4. Well, as you know well, mercury is a heavy liquid metal, and 1 liter of mercury weighs 13 kilograms, so it's liquid in the at room temperature. But this heavy metal, as extracted from nature, it generates chemicals that are equally hazardous. And in many activities that it is used for the manufacturing of lamps, fluorescent lamps, and although in Brazil we are doing our best to eliminate mercury of all sorts of industries, and also in the soda industry. So the use of mercury is very extensive, and dentistry included. And we have an interesting topic here, is that our nucleus has been gathering to discuss the mercury used not only because of the environmental issues, the health-related issues, and the society issues. So we try to cross through all those different arenas to see how this substance affects the world. So how it is mined, and once it is extracted, it is used in gold mining, in dentistry, and this very constant use of mercury ends up having many people exposed to the effects of this metal. And we were actually trying to make a special tribute to the victims, Minamata victims. Those were people who were intoxicated, and their offspring of a whole generation was obviously affected with developmental congenital problems, and that poses a very severe problem to society in Myanmar. And until today, and you will see that until the 60s that has started, until today, we can see a social movement to these victims of mercury. So we would like to make reference to this highly emblematic fact. So whenever in contact with man, and we can see here the toxic compounds resulting from contact with mercury. And we have the mining staff, also indigenous populations exposed to mercury, especially for gold mining, and the soda plants, lamp plants, dental professionals, dental assistants, the users of the public assistance, and the private health services as well. And in some hospitals here in Brazil, we, of course, despite it's officially forbidden, we still have mercury-based devices. And here in São Paulo, the state of São Paulo, we have this beautiful work that was developed by Dr. Cecilia Tavares, and she sort of screened all the hospitals trying to get rid of all the mercury-based equipment. And we know that it faces no geographical barriers, and if released in Brazil, it can be found in United States or elsewhere. It really doesn't respect the frontiers. It will go all over the world and might expose people who are in contact with it. One moment, please. Small glitch. So, guys, are you still there? Yes, Jeffrey, we are here. So if just try to click on the full screen. Yeah, great. Thanks for your tip. Thank you, Eric. And okay, let me try to just avoid going with my mouse here. So in the very first research in 2016, the title of that research was the Minamata Convention, the analysis of social impacts of this long-term results that was conducted by Dr. Rafael, and a lot of information were given after this piece of research. And back then, we already knew the need to get rid of mercury in dentistry. And about the health problems, Marilia we'll talk about that. And we have assessed a part of that, of those effects in our research as well. And then the Minamata Convention was then called and was very appreciated and having good results. So it affects many different systems, how the central nervous system, liver, kidneys, heart, and so on and so forth. So initially, our research was geared towards understanding what type of knowledge dental professionals had about mercury. There was a convention that was in effect by then, but we wanted to know better what was the level of knowledge of the professionals about mercury. And then we did a survey and the interview about mercury. It's a very robust piece of research that obviously encompasses many chemicals, mercury included. So the result of this Likert scale, you can see that the green bar has showed an important result here about the level of knowledge of those professionals. The yellow bar indicates that the level of knowledge was not ideal, indicating that some actions should be taken. And the red bar indicates that that was definitely a red flag, and that some sort of special information should reach those professionals. And so the green bar was basically that the amalgam, mercury-based amalgam could offer some risks to professionals' health, and that modern dental fillings without amalgam should be made available in the public healthcare. And that showed an important piece of information. When we reached other topics, when they were asked whether the mercury-based amalgam was a risk to patients, we saw that they didn't know that much with regards whether amalgam was a risk to patients or not, and if whether the specific amalgam filling was done, whether any types of risks in particular would be in exposing their patients. And when we asked whether they were favorable to the elimination of mercury, the level of knowledge again was not ideal, and that is an interesting thing. When we asked them whether they knew the Stockholm Convention and the Minamata Conventions, most of them simply knew nothing or hadn't a very superficial knowledge about this convention. And so we saw that we needed to expand the level of knowledge of the dental professionals, because they needed really to have more knowledge about that. So according to the partial results of this research, we concluded that professionals acknowledge that dental amalgam based on mercury is a risk for healthcare professionals and dental professionals during the manipulation and the filling procedure itself. They also acknowledge that modern dental fillings without amalgam should be made available in the public services. However, we also noticed that it was necessary for us to provide better knowledge to the general practitioners, dental practitioners, about the Minamata Convention, and also about what were the risks offered by mercury for patients during the manipulation application and in the post-op phase, knowing that this would offer some risk, but they didn't know what it was. So we needed definitely to increase the level of knowledge of those professionals, and because it's very important to count on their support in order to solve the problem. And here the Minamata Convention and is one of those multilateral types of agreements and treaties. So the parties gather in meetings so that they can discuss and understand what is the status of that subject around the world. So we will have our fourth assembly next November. It's going to be, it will take place in Bali, but it will be available for online access. And we obviously will have the opening session, the discussion of the ground rules and initial topics. And in this COP4, two of the most important topics to be discussed are the review and the proposal for changes in annexes A and B, and the materials that still use mercury, and also the information on dental amalgam, and a couple of other important topics that you can have access. And okay, Sylvia, I'm about to finish here. And still on amalgam, many recommendations were presented to the parties so that they knew what needed to be done, and so they could present in the COP4 what are the actions that can be developed in their territories, and things such as establishing national-wise objectives to do carie prevention and to promote low-cost alternatives. So there are many measures that those countries might have applied and may present in this online version of the Bali Convention. And so Brazil has put together a very robust type of document with very relevant information. And I only added a few here, but you can actually see the web link at the bottom of the page, and that was published in English. This is a free translation. And so, for instance, government says that it has been promoting control and prevention measures like water, adding fluoride to the water, and the investments in oral health. And so, and this is something that it's a sort of research that universities have to take hold of and to offer a better response to society, and also to improve the development of new materials like composite and glass ionomer in order to restore extensive caries lesions. And also the acknowledgement of by the government that this obviously offers a risk to the workers, and that this should not be disconsidered. And this is a document that you can find on the link. Again, in order to solve the situation, we had a very positive surprise of counting on the advocacy of Vicentinho, state representative, with this bill, who put together this bill about the control of the gradual reduction and eventual elimination of the dental mercury in something like 3 years. And if we are capable of gathering, enough support, we hope to be able to eliminate the use of mercury. And the amalgam consumption was definitely reduced to public services, and wherever you have a free dental care. And we do have, however, materials that are affordable and that are as effective as amalgam for needy or populations, or the population that are less served. So Dr. Cecilia Zavarius has a lot of knowledge on this, and we would like to pay a special tribute to the woman, the mother, physician, and professor who's always taken good care of her patients and the people who have worked with her. I had the chance to meet her and to work with her. Dr. Marcelia Medrado, she unfortunately passed away in 2014, but her whole research life was dedicated to researching cancer and advocating for the health of the workers. And she was an incredible human being, and we miss her very much precisely because of all the effort put forth in trying to preserve the rights of the workers. And so, as Dr. Sylvia said, PhD students at USB, and I'm also part of the Dental Alliance for dental-free mercury-free dentistry here, and also of the International Institute for Research. So I hope I was able to convey my message. Thank you very much for the invite. Thank you, Jeffer, very much, and for all the knowledge and the content that you shared with us, helping us to understand to the situation. And again, this is a discussion that has not only a political facet, but an ethical and a human and an environmental side as well. And I was touched here by the tribute to Dr. Marcelia, and just before she passed away, she basically, handed it over because she knew she couldn't continue now. So she's one of our heroes now. I'd like to give the floor to our guest and our dear friend and partner who represents the International Union in the Alliance. Sorry, I was touched and I got emotional. Dr. Charlie Brown, who's licensed by the Denison University and the Ali Law School, and he was elected the coordinator of the Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry, who is going to talk about Minamata Convention and the challenges faced by the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. So you have 20 minutes, and we are very touched by having you international guests present in our event. Thank you.
Olá, brasileiros. Obrigado, Universidade de São Paulo.
My dear Brazilian friends, thank you to the University of São Paulo.
Está feliz que Jeffer Blanco é nosso líder aqui. Obrigado, Jeffer.
Thank you, Jeffer.
Saúdo de Congresso, Senhor Venencino. An saúdo do Ministério da Saúde, Doutora Daniela e Senhora Josie. O Brasil é o gigante do Sul. O Brasil é muito importante. Brazil is a fantastic country. I have to now switch to English for the rest of the speech. You have such a, you are unique in your geography. You are the guardian of the greatest river in the world, the greatest river system in the world. Sao Paulo is the largest city in the Southern Hemisphere. It is also the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. Isn't that something? You have, of course, many parallels to my country with your states, 26 states. We have a few more than that, the Congress, President, and the federal district, which we did in 1790 and you did in the early 1960s. I can remember it when I was just at the beginning starting school that Brazil was going to create a whole new capital. And that was very exciting. And it was my pleasure after I finished law school to visit Brasilia. I always wanted to see it and see what was it like to build a new city and a new capital. So it was great I could be there. You're a country also with a unique history in the Americas. Your route to nationhood was transitional. rather than having fighting and a revolution. You transitioned. Basically, Portugal decided Brazil was more important than Portugal. So the emperor came over here, the king came over here and became an emperor. He was only a king in Portugal, but in Brazil, you're so important, he was an emperor. And then the emperor just left. I mean, you didn't have to throw him out and have a big war. He just in 1888, 1889, Imperador Pedro II just left. And that takes us to Amálgama, because Amálgama is so old, it started in the time of Emperador Pedro II. That is, you did not, Amálgama is a primitive 19th century pollutant. It hurts teeth. It's tooth unfriendly. It has no value today because the alternatives are here. The alternatives are tooth friendly. They're 21st century. They buttress the tooth. They protect the tooth. They don't hide the mercury. You know, those who put mercury in the mouth often hide it from the consumers. So we need tooth-friendly, modern, non-polluting dentistry. All the reasons to have dentistry favor the alternatives such as composite and glass ionomers, and none of them favor amalgam. I'm just so pleased that Jeffer, and he's done an incredible job, has assembled so many key players. And I start with the University of Sao Paulo, just the federal university. You've hosted this, that you've talked about, ethics and how important that is, and bringing together health and environment, which of course is what the Minamata Convention is about. And we really appreciate it. I also, to have a member of Congress here, that's just really fantastic that you can bring here a Congress, a federal deputy, Mr. Beninchente, and also you even have a bill in Congress, which is pretty remarkable at this stage. The Declaration of Santos is something civil societies assemble. That's for them to talk about, not me, but it's also remarkable. And I'm just so pleased with the great participation here of civil society, of the NGOs, the environmental groups and other NGOs, lawyers group, and all these groups that have signed on to this. That's so important to have you all in this, and have a seminar that's bringing together so many important people and so many important groups. When we talk about the Amazon, we've got to realize, and it's been alluded to, mercury's in heavy use in the Amazon in illegal gold mining. And it's really hurting the people who live there. It's really hurting the water. And the water, of course, flows right through Brazil. It stays in the water. Mercury doesn't go away. And it's an element, so it's there in isolated amounts. So when it's concentrated by mankind, that's when it becomes dangerous and toxic. But a source of that mercury that's used in gold mining is amalgam. Unethical pharmacists, dentists, mercury sellers, and so on are doing the black market sales to mercury in Brazil and Indonesia and the other continent, and in the Amazon, Brazil and Peru, and in Nigeria, and all these places, they are doing illegal mercury sales of the amalgam, pretending it's for the teeth, but it's not. And so one value, besides many others, of ending amalgam is we cut off a major source of mercury that's used in the Amazon, and that's destroying native people who live there, their lives, and destroying the habitat as mercury would do. It is so toxic. So I would like to now go to my PowerPoints, and I'll get more official now in my speech. If the technician could please put up my PowerPoints, I will start talking from them. And thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, or ma'am, very much. Yes, we're making the progress toward the campaign for mercury-free dentistry. I started as an American advocate. I'm an attorney, and we have a U.S. NGO, Consumers for Dental Choice. But in 2010, it was time to unite NGOs all over the place and create the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. We are very much in your continent and your region. We have a great campaign in Colombia. We have a great campaign in Argentina. And we have a wonderful leader and a campaign in Uruguay. You heard her speak, Maria Carcamo. She leads this entire campaign all through the Latin America, Caribbean, and has been such a great advocate and such a great leader. It's been a wonderful pleasure to work with Maria. I want to tell you a story of how important Brazil is. Let's go to the next slide, sir. Ma'am, I don't know if it's sir or ma'am. Yeah, good. That's the Minamata Convention. I want to start and tell you how important Brazil was and still is, but Brazil was at a key time, and that's the negotiations. In 2012, Montevideo, not too far from where you are, next country over, in Montevideo, the world was meeting and negotiating. Countries across the world were negotiating the treaty. And there were interest groups that had so influenced the delegates that they were going to toss out the products from the treaty. They were just going to throw out amalgam. And it was in the treaty, but they were throwing it out. And the meeting had gone, the last night had gone all the way past midnight, and it was out of the treaty. And in walked a delegate from Brazil, a man, I'd love to find out who it is someday and thank him personally. He walked into the room and he said, products are going back into that treaty. If you took products out, to the moderator, if you don't put them back in, we will blow up this whole treaty. We will stop the whole treaty. And you won't know what to do because we're in the 4th session out of 5. We can't start over. So you put products back in the treaty. It was after medianoche. It was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning when this Brazilian man came in the room from somewhere else and said, this is it. You've got to change the treaty. And he saved the products. He saved amalgam, and it went in the treaty because that man stood up. And we're very grateful to Brazil and the Brazil government for that moment in 2012, without which we wouldn't have had amalgam in the treaty because we'd been defeated and he brought it back. So it's really, really remarkable story of leadership. And you are a country that has leadership, and we need your leadership now. Jeffer has explained that the Minamata Convention is at a crucial point. And that's the next round of negotiations. There'll be a virtual meeting on technical issues only in November, but the big meeting next spring, next for you, that's next fall. I'm sorry, I mixed up my hemisphere. Well, some of Brazil's in the northern hemisphere. So let's just say March, which is spring to very northern Brazil and autumn to most of Brazil. Anyway, in March, the world will regather in Indonesia, Bali, as explained, and we'll take up consideration whether to phase out amalgam. We have to phase it down. They have to get less. Suriname, by the way, is phasing it out. Your neighbor, Suriname, is ending amalgam, as a country can do. They are just done. They know they can do it. They can do it. So can any country. And they have the willpower, and we congratulate that country just north of you, Suriname, that has stepped up and said, we're going to end amalgam. But the whole world could end amalgam in that upcoming treaty. Africa wants to do it. The Africa has a plan to phase out amalgam, and the European Union has a plan to partially phase it out for children and breastfeeding women and pregnant women. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, please. This is why you can be mercury-free. As I mentioned, Suriname's done it. An island country has done it. St. Kitts and Nevis, they've gone amalgam-free. Suriname. Guyana is very close. Uruguay, as my dear friend Maria Carcamo pointed out, is ending amalgam in its curriculum. So the future of amalgam in Uruguay is over. There's no future because the future dentist won't do it. But we can take these steps for children. You can do it. And you've even got a bill in Congress to do it now. So it could be done by law. It could be done by dental school initiative. It could be done by dentists. It could be by consumer advocates. It can be done a lot of ways. It can be done in government programs like Indonesia did. They just stopped it in government programs. It could stop in the military, as Bangladesh did and India did. There's no amalgam use in the military. It can stop in hospitals, as Cameroon did. There's a lot of routes to say, how do we reduce amalgam use and how do we end it in key sectors? It doesn't end like that. It ends by steps that people can take. Okay, next slide, please. Next one. Good. Yes, that's a list. That's not the full list, by the way. I'm in the Philippines in the top picture. That's a European picture there. We were in the capital of the European Union there. We were over at Strasbourg trying to convince the European Union to end amalgam, and they pretty much did. They agreed to end it for children, pregnant women, breastfeeding women in 2018. Now the European Commission has recommended that amalgam end for everyone. That still has to be taken up by the parliament, but the momentum is really great in Europe, and that's 27 countries. Italy, by the way, has agreed to end amalgam. So we have a Mediterranean country. I know there's a lot of Italian people, the heritage in Brazil, and they've ended it. Germany seems to be pretty close too, but that's a list right there of some of the countries, and it isn't even all of them. And I'll say Moldova, which is the poorest country in Europe. So it's not a question of poverty or richness, it's a question of desire and willpower. And you also see Suriname and among the South American country right on that list. Next slide, please. Okay, we've gone further with children. The lower right are my friends in Tanzania. In Tanzania, they didn't just end amalgam for children, for pregnant women and breastfeeding women. They ended amalgam for all women of childbearing age, effective 2023. All children, all women of childbearing age. The very middle person in the white coat, the tall woman in the white coat and black shirt, that's our leader, Doris Way, and she's just fantastic. And so that is Tanzania is going all the way to end amalgam in 2030. Above there is Bangladesh, and I'm holding up a picture with the chief dental, the chief general in the army. He ended amalgam in the army, the man in the reddish shirt with me also holding up that poster. And he's saying amalgam-free dentistry in that dental office. The lower left is a session in Parliament in Europe. So let's go on to the next slide. You can see scenes. These are pretty much Asian scenes where we've taken these steps. And that's a big gathering of people in Asia in the lower left, and other meetings. But as I say, this movement is worldwide. I don't want anyone to think that it's big countries do it and small don't, or small do and big don't, rich do and rich. It's a question of the civil society and government and dental associations want to sit down, dental schools, consumer groups, environmental groups, and get the amalgam problem solved and move on to modern dentistry, pollution-free dentistry. And this seminar that you're doing right now, this seminar you folks, you Brasileiros are doing right now is exactly the step we need to launch in the giant country of the South, Brazil, launch the campaign forward for mercury-free dentistry. Again, I'm very grateful to you all, honored to be here to speak to people who are making this commitment for action that you're doing by coming together in this important, under the circumstances, virtual as everything is, but under the circumstances, it's outstanding. Let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, the USA we're not proud of what we're doing in my country. We just weren't doing things. And then last year that changed. The US Food and Drug Administration, and we've been pushing them pretty hard, pretty hard. I sued them. I'm a lawyer. I sued them one time and beat them in court because I was so tired of them not doing anything. But now they've done it. And they have stood up and they've said, we've got to end amalgam for children. We've got to end it for big category women, pregnant, breastfeeding, or planning to become pregnant, which could mean maybe many women, maybe most women, a lot of women, plus those with kidney disease, plus those with neurological disease. None of those people should get amalgam. It's a huge step. Tomorrow, by the way, we are not seeing enough action in our agencies, in our federal departments, federal ministries, you'd call it. The federal ministries that do dental care, our Army, Navy, our military, our indigenous health for American Indians, our prisons, veterans, those programs are not doing enough. And we have filed a complaint with the White House. We're going to the White House tomorrow with a letter saying there needs to be action. And 50 groups have signed on to that. And by the way, I want to welcome a good friend of mine. She's here listing in as Zuleika Nies from one of the southern states, south of Rio, south of Sao Paulo. And we've worked with Zuleika for the last almost 10 years for mercury-free dentistry, as well as many other causes she does as an NGO leader. So welcome Zuleika as a participant. Let's go on to the next slide. Yes, that's good. That's the last slide. And we are, as I say, we're proud to see this kind of momentum in the giant country of the South. You've got a great history, great culture, a great chance to lead at the Minamata Convention. So over the months leading up to March of 2021, We hope that you will convince your government, and of course your government is here today, the Ministry of Health, convince the government to say, let's lead. Let's help lead the world, as Brazil has done many times in leading the world. Let's lead the world to this environmental decision, not just for the world's sake, for the sake of the Amazon, for the sake of the mercury in the Amazon, for the sake of the low-income people, because, you know, amalgam is not given much to middle-class people. People like me don't get amalgam because we're middle class. We don't get it, but poor people get it, and they shouldn't, because the price is the same. It's just a question of how much respect we want to have. So, and that's true in my country. My country, poor people still get amalgam, and it's terrible. We're really angry about it. So let's just say, you know, we can make the changes in the country. And also you can stand up, as your delegate did, as the Brazilian government official did in Montevideo in 2012, stand up to the world and say, let's get on the path. Let's put together a plan. Let's do mercury-free dentistry for the world. Obrigado.
Muito bom ouvir suas palavras.
Thank you very much. It's really great to hear your words, Charles. And I have to say that, you know, yes, I have to say that we are true partners in this discussion and in these initiatives. Obviously, you know, we are, you know, right now far from each other. I mean, physically at least, but we can still get together no matter how far we are from one another. I have to say that you made a lot of important statements here in your vehement defense of this point. And this strength really comes through the screen. I'm sure that we're going to keep talking to you, sir. Let me also record here the bill of law that we have here. The author is called Carlos Henrique Amorim, and that's his name. And this is what Congressman Vicentinha will talk about. But let me also speak about the importance of this bill of law right now. And it means that we are trying to make progress in this discussion. Let me also say that we will now have, and by the way, thank you very much, Mr. Brown, and please stay with us not only today, but you know, in future occasions as well. We have lots of challenges ahead of us in what concerns mercury and environmental issues, and we need smart partners also coming from different areas, people with different, you know, knowledge, so as to add up to the knowledge that we have here, which is something that I tried to allude to in my opening remarks. So let me now yield the floor to Dr. Graham Monroe Hall, saying to everyone that Dr. Monroe Hall is right now in Spain. There's a 5-hour difference. And if someone wishes to ask questions to Dr. Monroe Hall, I would like you to please ask those questions via the chat feature. And we're going to try to convey those questions to him, because given that it is, you know, 5 hours, you know, later there than here, he might not be around with us for the whole duration of our meeting. So if you have any questions, please have them on the chat box. And we're going to try at the end of his presentation to have those questions answered, because we set up some time at the end of all presentations for Q&A. But I mean, obviously, if we have the time to do that in the end. So let me then introduce, let me ask the team to please also post a link to the Declaration of Santos, the one on dental amalgam, you know, a letter written by, you know, a number of different groups here from our region, so that people can start reading that document, because at the end, we're going to read it here to you. So Dr. Graham Monroe Hall, a dentist and general clinician in the UK for over 40 years, former chairman of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology in Europe, also a director of dentistry at the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. He works in a working group in the areas of training and transition in the Alliance. So Dr. Graham Monroe Hall will talk about the hazards of dental amalgam to human health. So thank you very much, Dr. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to give this presentation today. We'll cover many topics briefly, but each topic is a 2-hour presentation by itself, so things will be quite brief. Although I do the talking, it's really a joint collaboration with my wife, Dr. Lillian Monroe Hall, who's also a dentist. I've talked on many topics to different groups around the world for a lot of years, and I've picked up slides from many presentations for you today. I speak to dentists, medical doctors, ministers, politicians, civil society groups, etc. Really anyone who'll listen. Now I'll try and get the presentation up. There we go. Okay, the first slide, these are the topics that we'll be covering today: dental amalgam, mercury, health, economics, and environment. All these are the concerns of dental mercury. I'll talk a little bit about how I became involved, and if time permits, we can discuss clinical matters, including the safe removal of amalgam and protecting the dental staff from mercury exposure. I've been a general dental practitioner since 1971, that's 50 years now, and I've been 40 years a mercury-free dentist. What happened to me was, at the age of 28, I was diagnosed with a fatal heart condition. I'm now 74. It was actually mercury poisoning from working as a dentist. I managed to survive this diagnosis due to vitamin C in high doses, which we can talk about later if there's time. One day in the practice, a lady came in with a withered arm and chronic fatigue. She had a problem walking more than 20 meters. She asked me to remove her amalgams to help restore her health. I told her this was rubbish, but I did it anyway. But the joke was on me. Within 6 weeks, her arm began to come back to life and the chronic fatigue left. I then came across a book called The Toxic Time Bomb by Mike Ziff. And after reading this, I was committed to be a mercury-free dentist. I am the Chief Dental Officer for the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry, and I've been involved with the Minamata negotiations since the beginning in 2010 in Stockholm. I've been recognized by the convention as an expert on dental mercury. With my wife, we've authored this book, Toxic Dentistry Exposed, which is a link between dentistry and chronic disease. It tells what we do, how we do it, and why, illustrated with case histories. It's really written for the patient rather than the professional. In this book, that we say that diseases, what we call modern chronic diseases, or MCDs, such as cardiovascular disease, anxiety, depression, the autoimmune diseases such as Parkinson's, MS, as well as chronic fatigue, arthritis, etc., are all linked to toxic exposure and individual genetics. This is a report that I wrote for the Minamata Convention on Health. And the reason I'm showing this is that all the science is full of scientific references, and anything I talk about and claim today is in fact backed up by published peer-reviewed science. And the references you will find in this report. This is just part of the table of contents just to show you what we mean by it. Then we have a comparison of dental materials. We talk about the environment, health risks and benefits, and we talk about mercury neurotoxicity, as well as to vulnerable groups. This is a link, so you can take a screenshot of this if you wish. And this will give you a link to the report, which is very comprehensive in, although brief, all about the pathological effects of dental mercury.
Sorry, Dr. Green, you are not sharing your screen properly.
No?
Can you try again, please?
From the beginning?
No, for the slide you are.
How do I do that? Do I go on full screen or what?
Can be full screen.
How do I get full screen?
Choose share screen and then choose your window for the PowerPoint.
I've done a share screen. I'm just.
If you prefer, we can share for you, but you need to look at the slides and ask us for pass for the next slide, okay?
Okay, do that.
Okay. One moment. You can continue for now. I will share in a minute.
Okay, so I apologize for the technical hiccup on my part there, but I'm sure your IT team will get on top of it. Also, this slide just shows you the web link to the report. If anyone has problems with the link, you see my email address at the bottom of each slide, which is wafmfd-uk@steeps.net. If you send me a message, then I will send a link over to you. Let's just talk about the basics of amalgam. Amalgam, although most dentists claim it to be silver fillings, is in fact 50% mercury, 25% tin, and 25% silver. It's not a stable mixture. Mercury is constantly leaking out from all amalgam fillings. Not only is it not stable chemically, it's not stable physically, in that as amalgam gets old and corrodes, what you will see is a crack in the teeth. And what I've illustrated here, the little picture on the left, which I hope you can see, is a crack down the tooth. And when an amalgam then is removed, you'll find the whole tooth cracked right down to the root, and this quite often endangers the tooth. Could we have the next slide, please? Are we still going? Hello?
Yes, Dr. Green, the slides are showing now.
Okay, so
Can
I'll
you
go on
see?
to the next one.
Okay, next one. This one?
Okay, yeah. The greatest, this is one of the most important slides of the whole presentation. The greatest human exposure to mercury is from dental amalgam fillings. This is from the WHO Environmental Health Criteria number 118 from 1991. What this criteria set out to do is to find out where mercury exposure actually came from. And what they found out was that dental amalgam was by far the greatest exposure to humans from mercury. And what's more, they found a no observed effect level, NOEL, which cannot be established. What this really means is mercury, even in the smallest quantity and concentrations, causes pathology in the body. So just to let that sink home, no matter how small the exposure to mercury, it causes measurable pathology in the body. Next slide. This has been known for a long time. The head of the 118 paper was a Professor Lars Freiberg from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. Now, Professor Freiberg at the time was the world's leading authority on mercury and toxicity. And he gave testimony in 1991, 30 years ago, and he said, in conclusion, we consider that dental amalgam, from the strictly toxicological point of view, is an unsuitable dental filling material. It is our opinion that in the future, steps should be taken as far as possible to use other material than amalgam. Next slide. The next slides are very interesting. This is mercury vapor coming from a tooth. This is a tooth that has been extracted. The amalgam filling inside the tooth is 22 years old. What we did was we placed the tooth behind a phosphor screen and then rubbed it with an eraser or rubber that comes on top of a pencil for 10 seconds. That friction of the rubber on the amalgam released the mercury vapor, which you can see like smoke leaving the top of the tooth. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from the report that I wrote about mercury vapor. it says that mercury is readily absorbed through the lungs. It's highly diffusible and is able to pass through cell membranes as well as the blood-brain barrier and placental barrier to reach target organs. Once there, it changes to Hg2+ and becomes lipid soluble, attaching to sulhydryl groups in the brain. It can displace essential minerals such as zinc, interfere with enzymatic processes. It can kill neurons, generate high levels of reactive oxygen species, cause oxidative stress, deplete glutathione, which leads to greater damage from the oxidative stress. Mercury can change metal protein compounds that have structural and catalytic effects for gene expression, including cellular respiration, enzymatic processes, and autoimmune reactions and metabolism. The neurotoxic actions of mercury are many and complex. Many aspects of body functions can be affected by the neurotoxicity of mercury, which is why so medical conditions have been associated with it. There is no zero effect level for mercury, and a substantial proportion of the population may already be adversely affected by mercury. To show the toxicity of mercury vapor, it's just been a fact released at the Minamata Convention that mercury released from coal-powered fire stations in China travels through the atmosphere and has reduced the IQ of Inuit children in the Arctic. Next slide. So it comes to a question of a risk assessment. How many fillings do you need to be harmed? And this is from Dr. Richardson's risk assessment in 2012. You can find the reference to the original publication in the report. What's important about this slide is, if you look at the column amalgam, you see the component mercury, and the safe number of filled surfaces is 7 or 3 teeth. So if you have 3 or more teeth filled with mercury, you are likely to have an adverse health event of some description due to the mercury release from your amalgam fillings. If we look at the very bottom column, composite resin, we find when looking at that, there is no limit and no toxicity associated with this material, which is an alternative to dental amalgam. There's been many risk assessments over the years, from Richardson's again in 1996 for Health Canada, Matt's Berlin in 1999, and Dr. Mutters in 2005. All have the same conclusions. Mercury from dental amalgam can harm human health. Altogether, we've had 3 attempts to get rid of amalgam over the years. There's been what we call the amalgam wars. The third amalgam war actually started in Brazil. So it's fitting that close to the end of the war, I am talking to you in Brazil. This war was started by a Brazilian dentist called Dr. Olímpio Pinto in 1973. Dr. Pinto started the Brazilian Society for Oral Rehabilitation. Without Dr. Pinto, we wouldn't be here today, so the world owes a great debt to Dr. Pinto. The first war was in the 1860s in America, between the American Society for General Dentists and the American Dental Association, which was founded to promote amalgam and actually did hold until recently patents on amalgam and used to earn money from amalgam. So the American Dental Association has always been and still is a proponent of amalgam. The ADA won, and amalgam then became a popular filling material, and it really changed the face of dentistry because it allowed dentistry to be delivered to the masses rather than be a cottage industry for the very rich with gold fillings. In the 1930s, a German scientist called Dr. Stock proved that mercury was released from amalgam and harmed the body. He was at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. He clashed with the dental authorities and he loses his job. That was the Second War was over. And then the Third War began, as I said, in 1973 in Brazil. We still have the final battle ahead of us, but even in America, the FDA are changing. As they are saying, developing neurological systems in fetuses and young children may be more sensitive to the neurotoxic effects of mercury vapor. We're definitely winning. Next slide, please. The next one is amalgam toxic? Well, in order to be toxic, a substance has to obey the 3 laws of toxicity. So, does amalgam contain a toxin? Answer, yes, mercury. Does this mercury, can it be released from the amalgam filling? Yes, it's released in vapor and droplets. Is this mercury stored in the body and can it cause damage? And the answer is yes, it's stored in the brain, heart, kidneys, lungs, etc. Therefore, amalgam is, by definition, a toxic substance. Next slide. The basic principles of toxicology, and this is a slide borrowed from a presentation I gave to dentists in Lesotho, are 2. You remove the patient from the toxin, and you remove the toxin from the patient. To remove the patient from the toxin, all you have to do is stop using dental amalgam, stop poisoning the patient. To remove mercury or the toxin from the patient, then you need certain measures to both protect the patient, the surgical staff, and the environment from that removal. Next slide. These are just points to remember about amalgam. It's 50% mercury. Mercury is the most toxic naturally occurring element on the planet. There is no more naturally occurring element that is more toxic than mercury. All dental mercury eventually ends up in the environment, all of it. Mercury vapor is the most dangerous form of mercury. Mercury accumulates in body organs, and dental amalgam is the greatest source of exposure to mercury in humans. When you breathe in mercury vapor, within 20 seconds, it enters the brain, and a few seconds after that, it becomes in the lungs, kidney, heart, and spleen. Mercury exposure is extremely dangerous for the fetus because it can penetrate the placental barrier. Usually the placenta is extremely efficient at preventing toxins entering, but it can't prevent mercury. Mercury from the mother is preferentially absorbed by the fetus. Mercury accumulates in the brain and gut and spleen of the fetus and can cause developmental defects such as reducing the IQ or intelligence quotient. Studies have demonstrated that mercury has the ability to reduce the number of neurons and actually alter brain structure in individuals with prenatal exposure to mercury. Levels of up to 20 nanograms mercury per gram were found in German infant brain tissues, which were caused by the dental amalgam fillings of their mothers. Mercury levels 1,000 times lower than this at 0.02 nanograms mercury per gram leads to degeneration of neurons. Umbilical cord mercury increases according to the number of dental fillings of the mother. The level of mercury in cord blood per maternal amalgam fillings is between 0.76 and 1.4 micrograms mercury per liter per amalgam filled tooth, which, to put it in perspective, 1 amalgam filling in the mother will potentially expose the fetus to levels of mercury that are shown to cause abnormal brain development. Now we're going to talk about economics. Next slide, please. This is from a report to the EU in 2012, the Concord report. Please note the year. It's nearly 10 years ago since this report was written. And what this report did was to say, what are the actual true costs of using dental amalgam? Because there are environmental costs, the cleanup costs, there are health costs to society and the individual, and there are economic consequences, economic costs. And it estimated that each filling cost society on environmental costs alone between 60 and 100 US dollars. Dental amalgam can actually have a measurable economic consequences because it reduces the intelligence. And these two bell charts that you can see, one in red and one in purple, are here to illustrate this. If we have a society without exposure to mercury, it's the purple level. Whereas a society which is exposed to mercury, the IQ comes down a few points. It's only a few points, and most of these individuals can function well within society. However, the problem is at either end of the bell curve. At the right of the bell curve, you see that the drastic number, the difference between the red and the blue. And what happens here is there has been a drastic reduction in the individuals of higher intelligence. And conversely, at the other end, there's been a greater number of individuals with lower intelligence. By reducing the number of people with a higher intelligence, you are reducing the economic and intellectual drivers of society, and it actually has a measurable economic consequence that each gram of dental mercury released in the environment costs society $37 in lost economic activity. There are macroeconomic considerations too. Mercury is a biopersistent accumulative toxin, or PBT, and it's a non-degradable element. As Charlie said, it's an element and it cannot be degraded. The actual cost of society from using amalgam, the release both into the environment and the individual, is as such. By continuing to use amalgam, even with best practice management in dentistry, plus removing mercury from water sludge and trapping mercury release from crematoria, and also obviously the use of separators in surgery, creates an additional cost of between $41 and $67 to each amalgam fillings. To phase out amalgam has benefits such as reduced health costs, reduced environmental effects, and actually has job creation possibilities too. The cost avoided to society is between $60 and $128. The report also considered that mercury affects the fetal and infant brain, reducing intelligence and affecting eventual economic activity to society at large. Next slide, please. Now we're talking about the microeconomics, or how it impacts directly to the patient. The little photograph I have included on the right of the screen is a photograph of a tooth after an amalgam has been removed. As you can see, the amalgam has cracked the tooth right down the middle. Filling costs are similar between composite and amalgam. There is no financial reason to use amalgam anymore. Less tooth structure is removed in cavity preparation using composite and glass ionomer than is used with amalgam. There is a reduced likelihood of illness from mercury exposure. And I just take you back to the Richardson report, where if you have 3 or more fillings in your mouth, you are likely to suffer an adverse health event due to your amalgam. Less tooth fracture from amalgam expansion due to corrosion means an overall less restoration costs. As the cusp of the teeth snaps off, this leads to additional expense by putting an inlay, an onlay, or a crown on the tooth. Composite, on the other hand, strengthens the tooth, whereas dental amalgam weakens the tooth. Next slide. This is from our own general dental practice and our own statistics. By removing amalgams safely, this significantly reduced or eliminated neurological symptoms in over 80% of our patients. 8 months after amalgam removal, we found their symptom improvement was in fact 85%. 15% didn't improve. Again, to bring this into context, next slide. Dr. Mats Hansen Dr. Mats Hansson is from the Swedish Association of Mercury Patients. He's probably today's leading expert in mercury toxicity. He compiled 25 studies. He's a Swedish physiologist. And in these studies, he found what we found in general practice is that we found conditions such as anxiety, depression, obsessional compulsive disorder usually takes less than a week to resolve after you've removed the mercury amalgam properly. And as you can see, these studies from over 5,000 patients showed the things like anxiety, bad temper, depression, massive reductions to these symptoms just on reducing their exposure to dental mercury. The symptoms you have depends on your genetic load, your genetics, I should say, and the toxic load. I'll talk a little bit now about the difference between allergy and toxicity because it's often confused. Allergy is an immune system response and is not dose dependent. The smallest exposure can cause a reaction or symptom. Toxicity, on the other hand, is poisoning, usually the shutting down of body systems. That is dose dependent. The greater the dose, the greater severity of the symptoms. Patients can be both allergic to mercury and have toxic levels of mercury in their body from amalgam. What we found out was true was Professor Vera Stejskal from the Karolinska Institute. She had a rule of 25, 50, 25, and it goes like this. 25% of the population will have an immediate effect from exposure to the toxin, which in this case is mercury, whether that can be headaches, loss of memory, tremor, etc. 50% of the population will have a reaction to mercury, but it will be many months or years later. And if a symptom comes on years after the initial exposure to mercury, no one can connects it to that initial exposure. And 25% of the population do not seem to suffer any ill effects from mercury. So the next slide, please. Removing toxins correctly, and there is a correct way to do this, but I haven't got time to go into that today, allows the body to heal itself. Many dentists say they've removed amalgam, but yet see no response or improvement of health of their patients. Their failures are really due to three things. The patient has lost the capacity to heal, but we cannot judge that. It could be they're so far ill that they cannot come back from their illness. The failure of the dentist to identify and remove the toxins. Dentists, I'm afraid, cheat and leave traces of amalgam under composite fillings. This is a common fault. 50% of the patients who came to me who said they were amalgam free, in fact, were not. The dentist had just covered the tops of their amalgams with composite. This does not stop exposure to mercury from the fillings because the mercury goes through the nerves from the teeth directly into the brain. And also, failure support the detoxification and healing systems from the body. This is why sometimes you see it doesn't work. So in brief, and I think I'll end here, next slide, that mercury causes health issues at all concentrations. Amalgam is the greatest source of human exposure of mercury. Mercury leaks from amalgam constantly, 24 hours a day. Every time you brush your teeth, have a hot drink, or eat, you are increasing your exposure to mercury from your dental amalgams. Amalgam damages teeth due to corrosion and expansion. The health risks of dental amalgam are quantifiable and well known. The alternatives to amalgam are available, affordable, and effective. For example, composite has no known health risks. So I think I would like to end it there. I've gone on. So if anyone has any questions, they could please they could talk to me now, or they could email me at the email address underneath the slide.
Nós agradecemos muito a sua disposição.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Munro Hall, for all your words and how incredibly educational your lecture was in, exposing the information. And this is not specifically for dentistry, but rather to all healthcare professionals. This knowledge and the way you've exposed this information is very interesting, very educational. Thank you. Dr. Graham, Dr. Munro Hall, we've got here some questions, and we'll try to synthesize them here. Because you see, throughout your lecture, you've actually addressed some of the questions that came to us. There is one issue here related to the molar teeth and whether if there is a proven efficiency with regards to that. And in elderly patients, we can see the mercury tattoos, which is the seepage effect that sometimes happens from the tooth tissue to the soft tissue of the cheek. Is it possible for us to unstain that, and how could this be done? And there's another question here. Another question, which is, what is the degree of contamination of someone who had the amalgam filling for many years? This is a question that happened, with a good degree of recurrence here among our participants. So please, if you could please address this question.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting about the amalgam tattoos because we did some work with Professor Boyd Haley of the University of Kentucky on this, where we surgically remove the tattoos. And I'm afraid the only way of getting rid of these tattoos is to physically cut them out. And when you open up the tissue, you'll often find a sort of a lot of black dots and a black slime that penetrates the gum and goes right through to the bone and sometimes into the bone. And the only way you can remove these is to physically get rid of them. But what we found was they're actually associated with long-standing dental infections in the area, and it changes the electrical conductivity of the tissues, and it actually attracts amalgam, not just amalgam, but other components of dental metals, such as silver and tin, are attracted to these areas because of the exposure to infections, which is why you often see it, say, over the top of root-filled teeth or teeth with apicectomies. But the only way to get rid of them is surgically to cut them out. Someone who's been, the second question is the long-term exposure. Well, you could always hope you're part of the 25% who hasn't been exposed to it. One of the major problems with amalgam is that if it is associated with other metals in the mouth, such as a gold filling or a metal crown, then the amount of mercury coming off the tooth is 4 times greater than normal. So this is going to increase your exposure. All we can say is if you have a concern with long-term exposure, the things that come across the most are short-term memory issues and really bad temper. What you find typically in dentists, of course. But these are, so if you do have issues with short-term memory, or you find yourself becoming less tolerant, these are the classic long-term effects of mercury. So,
Obrigada pelas suas colocações.
Thank you, Professor Hall. Thank you. We do have a few other questions here. I'm going to quickly go through them, but if we can't address them all, we will send them over. And the first one is whether the dental professionals dental practitioners, and here we included not only dentists but assistants, whether they are still suffering intoxication, if we have any information with regards to that. And there was another question related to the fetus. If the person, for whatever reason, if we have a pregnant woman, and I think you've addressed this during your lecture, but maybe if you could just go over this again in a few words. Would there be any commercial interest in maintaining mercury in the industry? So those are the last three questions. I promise those are the last ones, and from now on we're going to send them over via email, and those questions will be answered via our email contact.
Okay. Very interesting. Do dentists and their assistants suffer? Yes, I mean, the fertility of dental assistants from dentists who use mercury is significantly reduced, and this has been known for a long time. Exposure to mercury does actually reduce the chances of conception from female dental assistants. There's work done by Eshivara on dentists who are being exposed to mercury over a period of years. And what she found was that dentists who've been exposed, say, for 20 years and had been placing and removing mercury amalgam fillings will actually have up to 7 points lower IQ than when they started out their dental life. But these dentists also had significant hand tremor, had less hand-eye coordination, and suffered greater mental instability. So from a scientific point of view, yes, we can actually measure the pathological effect of mercury exposure to dentists over the long term. The name to look up there is Eshivara. She was the lead researcher in this. In fact, I think in the report we do refer to her work. The next question, does industry see an advantage from using mercury? I think the dental industry is frightened of the legal consequences of using a toxic material and damaging people. If it becomes known that a dentist knew that this material he was using was released from the filling and could damage the patient, say neurologically, causing anxiety, depression, etc., they may be held liable for the consequences of that. And I think this fear of the legal consequences is what's kept the dental industry from renouncing mercury before. They're quite happy to get rid of mercury on environmental grounds. In other words, mercury in the environment is very bad for everybody, but mercury implanted in your tooth 2 to 3 centimeters from your brain and constantly releases, that doesn't cause any problems. It's an obvious and complete scientific nonsense. Everybody knows this. And I think the industry has a great fear of the financial consequences of being sued by a lot of angry patients who have been damaged by mercury if they admit that it is damaging, because the science that mercury is released and damages people actually goes back to Dr. Stock, who was a fine scientist in the 1930s. So it's nearly 100 years. So I think the industry is frightened of that. And also, as ever, they're frightened of change. Change is always bad. There was a third question in there.
I think that was the one about pregnant women or fetuses.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what was the content of the question, but that was what was mentioned.
Yeah, well,
so it was about gestation and pregnancy.
Yeah, all through each trimester, the fetus can pick up mercury from the maternal amalgam fillings, and even while breastfeeding, the child gets mercury from the mother. All this again is scientifically verified. But then again, I don't want people to sort of panic in the mere fact if someone is pregnant and has mercury fillings. You should not get the mercury fillings removed during that time, because it'll only increase your exposure to mercury from removing the fillings. Wait until you've stopped breastfeeding the child before you have them removed. The fetus actually acts like a sponge in this respect. It soaks up all the maternal mercury, which is why you see mothers actually sort of bloom with health. They've never felt better during pregnancy, really, because the fetus is acting as a toxic sponge and soaking up these toxins that can enter through not just mercury, but mainly mercury through the placental barrier. So it is something to be aware of. But any mother or expectant mother out there who shouldn't be, it's something to be aware of and to be concerned. And if you're planning to get pregnant, to remove amalgam fillings would make sense. But if you're already pregnant or are already breastfeeding, please do not have your amalgam fillings removed.
Muito obrigada, Dr. Graeme. Suas colocações.
Dr. Monroe Hall, thank you so very much for all the knowledge that she shared with us. We still have many other questions here, but we will make sure that they reach you, not only to you, but to Dr. Charlie Brown as well, in case we don't afford to discuss them. We can't afford to discuss them here during our meeting. Thank you for dealing with this topic in such a detailed manner with so many important information. And I'm pretty sure that the dental practitioners and other healthcare professionals have had very important information related to amalgam mercury in particular. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Daniela, who's a PhD in collective health from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's the director of the Environmental Health Department and Surveillance of Public Health of the Ministry of Health. Dr. Daniela Roseholz is going to talk about the perspective of control and elimination of amalgam and mercury in Brazil, aiming at the environmental protection and health workers. Thank you, Dr. Daniela. It's an honor to count on your presence here with us. Hi, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, we can, Doctor. I hope that by now you can also see my screen.
Daniela, tava ok, agora você trocou
well, for some reason now, it was coming out fine at first, but now it's not. So if you could just get back to the full screen mode. Thank you. Lovely. Well then, good afternoon again to all of you, ladies and gentlemen present in this audience. It's a pleasure to be here with you, attending to such incredible lectures. And thanks for the invite, for sharing some of the work developed at the Ministry of Health. I did my best in order to put together a presentation with a general overview of what we've been doing with regards to mercury and other chemicals, generally speaking, and other metals, but mercury in particular, so that I could then speak of the items related to the Minamata Convention in particular. And so I'd say that the very first thing that we need to observe are the responsibilities of the unified health system, as we call our public health system here in Brazil. And so if we would think of how we put together the system, we have to think in the following terms, that all the disease process, used to be at the center, but now the health promotion has become the core, and this is now happening at the municipal level, and this is really the greatest responsibility, promoting health through providing healthcare to the population. And the state and the Ministry of Health are part of the system and trying to offer support to the municipality in order to play this role of local sanitary authority. And obviously, concerting efforts with the sanitary surveillance and with the shared responsibility of those actions. And in 2018, then, we had the publication of the National Policy on Health Surveillance. And the health surveillance implies a responsibility to promote health quality, reducing mortality, and other risks that are a result of consumption and use in the territory. So that basically, leads us to think many exposures. And this is something that we did in order to reduce social inequalities and searching for more equality.
A normative instruction from 2005 basically describes our subsistence of health surveillance and environmental health. And among the various elements that we have to pay attention to, we have contaminants, environmental contaminants, and chemicals. We have a whole set of patterns of exposure to chemicals, which include herbicides and also asbestos and mercury as some of the main elements that we have to be mindful of so as to have proper environmental surveillance efforts. And here we have, this is what our departments look like. This is the org chart for it. We have a department here which includes a number of things, including occupational health and health surveillance. And we have 3 coordinators here looking at each one of these elements here, the environment here, and occupational health and emergencies in public health. And in it, we have efforts in the area of detection, assessment, monitoring, and response, so that every time that we have an emergency coming up involving chemicals, this is also something that our department is taking care of, including risk reports and communication, everything pertaining to occupational health as well, occupational diseases, which also have very strong connections with matters pertaining to exposure to mercury, and also surveillance on environmental health. And this is basically the branch of our office that is in charge of managing the interfaces connected to safety and chemicals. So this is our chain of command inside our environmental health team. I'm the director of this department. We have Thais Cavendish. She is the general coordinator of this specific office, and Yara is the alternate coordinator. And we have 40 people working with us who are basically involved in doing all of the preparation work and development of public policies in the area of environmental health. So given every one of the processes that we work with in our team, they range from water for human consumption, matters pertaining to air pollution, and also chemicals. And I'm going to try and talk a little bit more about that, and more in detail about that. But I should also remind you that we all are strongly connected also to matters pertaining to climate change, agriculture, land use and occupation, and matters pertaining to industrial activity as well. So let me now focus more specifically on those 3 axes that I alluded to here. We have first environmental health surveillance, and more specifically in matters pertaining to exposure to chemicals, because we have a number of important outcomes in healthcare, and the speakers who spoke before me, by the way, have alluded to a number of potential health outcomes connected to exposure to mercury. And we have, well, this is basically the rationale that we use in the job that we do. We work with water and food safety indicators, but we also consider everything that might happen to people who are exposed to chemicals, and mercury more specifically. And exposure to mercury through amalgam is one of the elements that is taken into account by the processes that we have in place in the territories where we work. So we've basically been trying to implement safe practices for the management of chemicals, since chemicals are present in many different moments in our lives. Sometimes, we are more, or sometimes we are less exposed, but exposure to chemicals is something that happens throughout our lives at different levels of intensity, evidently, and also at different moments, which will ultimately lead to different health outcomes. So the areas where we work so that we can, do proper surveillance of chemicals, it encompasses activities in the area of risk assessment so that we understand more specifically where the routes of exposure are, so that we can try and intervene upon those routes for exposure ultimately not to happen. We also try to manage and assess exposure, because sometimes it is not possible for you to completely remove exposure to a given chemical of interest. And when that is the case, you have to monitor the many ways in which people are exposed to chemicals and how, this exposure might lead to poisoning, considering a number of different and potential paths. And we also have to monitor for effects of such exposure, because, for most of the time, we can't interrupt exposure, and we can't oftentimes monitor exposure before a health outcome is produced. And when that is the case, we also have to pay specific attention to the effects of such exposure so that we can do some epidemiologic monitoring and investigations based on a protocol that I will later describe to you. So we basically start from the possibility of exposure, from the possibility of there being exposure of the community to specific chemicals of interest, and mercury is one of them. Populations who are also exposed on account of, the fact that they live in contaminated areas. We have many of these, by the way, here in Brazil, and you can also have communities exposed to air pollutants. So you can see, as you can see over here, you have different levels of exposure, which will occur also for different time lengths. Sometimes you have, low dose, however, a long-term exposure. Sometimes it is short-term exposure to high dosages. But that is all part of what we have to do. We have to find whenever those issues occur. Obviously, we have to set, a specific order of priority to each one of these events. We have to know what the contaminants of interest are and the routes, exposure routes tied to this process. Whenever we have a contaminated site, for instance, we always know that it's not only one chemical that we will find there, but actually a whole array of chemicals of interest, which will then be used for me to develop a protocol. We can say, for instance, this community is exposed to these specific exposure routes, and those are the mechanisms of exposure. So first question that we have to ask is, how can we interrupt exposure? And then we have to develop a protocol to follow up that population so that we can verify the kinds of health outcomes that might be produced. Another important step is having this protocol, or which basically describes the method by which we're going to be looking at those populations based on their risk of exposure and vulnerabilities, and how we can consider that as part of what we have to do, with the aid of our healthcare agents, local healthcare agents, and sometimes also in terms of whether we should refer parts of that community to hospitals. So as we look at each one of these territories, we basically find out about what's going on through these reports, such as the one that I am showing here. We have a series of reports that have to be sent to health authorities, federal health authorities, and cases of contamination is one of those. And we have a system called SINAN, in which we record each one of these reports. And what I have over here for you is basically it's basically some data that I gathered on health-related indicators, which are used to assess exposure of specific communities. So looking specifically at metals, you should see that we can't, at least in the official systems that we use to record those cases, we cannot see here cases of exposure to mercury. I mean, we do have a few records of exposure to mercury, but exposure to metals, and that also includes other metals, which are also important. But this still shows how this topic has been given little attention, specifically when it comes to finding populations that are potentially exposed and potentially poisoned by mercury. And this also speaks a little about the kind of a patient or a community members that we're looking at here in terms of age and sex as well. So people aged less than 15 years, for instance, a lot of them here also between 0 and 4 years of age. And we have here basically unintentional exposure, which ends up, affecting people in this age range. Here we have additional data showing the circumstances or the sites at which exposure took place and the categories of exposure. This also serves as indication to us of the fact that we cannot capture the relation, a relation or a correlation between exposure to mercury and occupational disease, which is the case of amalgam. Because if you look at it and if you try to see whether this is connected to work, no, it is not connected to work. So we are actually missing out on those potential reports of people who are exposed or maybe even suffering from mercury and metal poisoning. And type of care provided, you have a significant portion here of people who are served or seen in hospitals, because most of the times what we can actually capture through our formal information systems relate to acute poisoning events. So low dose long-term exposure, which is chronic poisoning cases, usually, or maybe I should say that the most majority of those end up not being recorded in our reporting systems, and that ends up making it almost impossible for us to see this problem. And sometimes we do not have public policies either to prevent that the population actually develops disease as an outcome of such exposure. So as part of the strategic projects that we have concerning chemicals in our environmental health department, in addition to everything that I spoke about here about the management or safe management of chemicals, we also have a sectorial plan to get the Minamata Convention properly implemented. We have a number of other projects which are also very interesting concerning exposure to chemicals, of which I will not have the time to speak about today, unfortunately. So let me speak a little about the role of health in the Minamata Convention. Jefferson showed to us a lot of very interesting and detailed information on how we work with international agreements, and I'm talking about conventions and protocols, and how those agreements are ultimately internalized in our nation. And I will go over that very quickly because he has spoken at length about this in his presentation. But we who work in this area, health and the environment, and I've been working with this for over 20 years, and I guess that you too know how hard it is for you to establish, to have even a paragraph about health in chemical safety conventions. We have a number of them, Basel and Rotterdam and Stockholm conventions, which sometimes will touch upon health, but they do not address it more profoundly. And with that, we end up not being able to develop public policy in this area, which is again a very sensitive area. The Minamata Convention is not the case. It does discuss the irrelevance of adverse effects on people's health, the existence of vulnerable populations, and it also contains a specific chapter on health. So Article 16 of the Minamata Convention talks about, gold miners and their families, healthcare workers as well, which is something that we're talking about here today, indigenous and riparian populations, waste collectors. So you have a whole roster of people who might be exposed to mercury, and the convention does describe it very clearly how we should strengthen our institutional and technical capabilities, how we should implement educational programs, and how we should also engage in prevention, diagnostic, and treatment initiatives. And this gets into that same rationale that I showed earlier to you, with which we have been working with for over 20 years, of identification, prioritization, assessment of what has to be done based on the health outcomes, and then we move on to establishing follow-up protocols for exposed populations. So Brazil signed the Minamata Convention in 2013. And we had a legislation written, enacted in 2017, and also a presidential decree in 2018. And this is just so you see, how long it takes for countries to internalize the requirements of these conventions. There's a whole series of rights that have to be followed. And in 2018, then we opened a working group in the healthcare department so that we could develop the means by which the Minamata Convention requirements would be implemented here in Brazil. So between 2018 and 2021, we've had 12 meetings or workshops actually to plan for the kind of research that we still needed to bridge some knowledge gaps so that we were able to properly do what we had to do, given the challenges related to implementing the Minamata Convention requirements. And our sectorial plan basically included 6 axes. Axis 1 is measures to strengthen the normative framework and the institutional capabilities so that we can truly get the Minamata Convention implemented in Brazil. Axis number 2, management of inventories of equipment and inputs and activities that contain or use mercury in the health care business. So we have made a big effort now to also list the types of equipments in healthcare that we're still using mercury, together also with the elimination of all such equipment and supplies used currently in Brazil in the healthcare business. So this was something that we did together with Axis 1, which revolved around strengthening our normative or regulatory framework. And this was produced by means of a resolution published by the Anvisa. Axis 3 revolves around measures to disseminate information and build awareness in the general public. This is also very relevant. We have to explain the reasons why certain measures are being taken upon a certain subject so that it is properly implemented, well accepted by the population, and so that we can feed that back with additional measures. And then we have Axis 5, development of international cooperation, and Axis 6, development of research related to the effects of mercury in health and on the environment. So the sectorial implementation plan basically comprises 31 actions, 12 of which have been implemented, 5 are currently in progress, 11 are yet to be implemented, and 3 are basically permanent actions that we have been trying to implement since 2018. So some of the highlights here of completed actions: we had the publication and also sharing of this guideline, which basically banned the manufacturing, sales, and use of equipment that contains mercury. Also, the ban of dental amalgam in non-encapsulated form, 2 ordinances from the Brazilian FDA, with also devised a diagnostic profile on the use of dental amalgam with mercury, and also a few more steps that we would have to take. We've also opened 3 subgroups inside the working group responsible for the implementation of this sectorial plan, so that we were able to also have a closer look at research and also ongoing education and proper reporting practices. So we saw that it was also important to set additional discussions through subgroups, because through our system, we had some specific actions which would be better implemented if they were, further discussed and subdivided into other groups. We also produced a platform to communicate information on a sectorial plan, and we also developed a brochure containing information on how to report cases of mercury poisoning, bringing a little bit of what we saw as we sorted through the data, because we really had to get in touch with healthcare workers to see, to inform them of how to report cases of potential mercury poisoning and how to report that information, even if you have just a suspicion over about a specific patient that you see. And given then the roster of actions planned for this year and next year, or among them, the idea is that we should publish our basic guide on mercury contamination for indigenous communities and people living in the fields, forests, and waters. And also, we will publish an epidemiologic report looking more specifically at cases of mercury poisoning, which I alluded to here in very general terms. And we're going to have one for mercury alone. We will also translate and have a program on mercury poisoning to healthcare workers. We'll also develop a clinical protocol and treatment guidelines. This is actually in progress as we speak. The idea is to get these done by the end of next year. And I should also mention, for those of you who are not aware of how it all works with the Brazilian public healthcare system or unified healthcare system, whenever you establish a set of therapeutic guidelines, and this is done by a specific committee here in Brazil that discusses basically the actions that will be implemented and the services in healthcare that should be offered by our public healthcare system. If you look at the, having or developing a protocol for treatment, it basically means that whatever we define for people exposed to mercury, that has to be done by every one of the healthcare workers of the Brazilian public healthcare system. We'll also publish some guidance on how to report cases of mercury poisoning on SINAN and SIASI. Those are two information systems that we have here. We'll also train healthcare workers on prevention, diagnosis, treatment, reporting, and management of waste containing mercury. And meaning that we're going to basically have to educate each one of the healthcare workers that are present in areas in which we have people who are vulnerable and who are potentially exposed to mercury. We're going to have to provide them with guidance on how to treat those cases. Well, some of the challenges that I would like to share with you, it's also very important, and it's not indifferent actually from what we have seen in other countries. First, you have to establish a proper logistics so as to collect and dispose of mercury properly. So have a number of places now, sites in which we have equipment, medical equipment that uses mercury, and they are stored safely right now. But we have to establish a logistics to transport it safely and then to dispose of it properly in the environment. And this is something that has also been broadly and often discussed with our environmental team. We have to estimate the number of workers exposed to mercury in Brazil, and we have to look at an occupational exposure matrix as well. And by the way, this is the MEO methodology. MEO stands for, in Portuguese, stands for Occupational Exposure Matrix. And we have that for a number of other chemicals. We've finalized it for, elements such as asbestos and a few other pesticides. And because this is a challenge that is currently in progress, and this is certainly a most important step that we have to take here. And also health surveillance and health care to populations exposed to mercury, including also people who work in small gold mining operations, which to us are still a big challenge, since this is oftentimes, a job that is not, let's say, a recognized job, and oftentimes they are illegal miners. So the clinical protocol will basically contain these elements that I've alluded to here, going from diagnosis all the way to treatment, including follow-up and surveillance. And with all of these steps that we need to take, starting from the definition of the scope of work until we get to a moment in which this is presented and submitted to public consultation at the committee. And as a part of each one of our subgroups, we have to gather the ideas over what we should be working on for the next few years. And it could include also adjustments and adaptations of methodologies for our public healthcare system, looking at research on mercury poisoning. In terms of ongoing education, we have to develop educational strategies, and we also have to develop a platform in which we can provide easy access to healthcare workers so that they can be trained. And as I said earlier as well, we have to go through, the errata of notification and reporting actually, so that we can improve the quality of information that is sent to us. And if we have better quality information, we can then translate that into concrete public policy so that we can basically have everyone in our healthcare clinics reporting data properly to us. Excuse me, Dr. Daniela, you have 2 minutes. Oh, okay. And it is also important to say that the implementation of our actually the sectorial plan for the implementation of the Minamata Convention for the healthcare industry, this was actually a case study published at the World Health Organization. It was really seen as an example of success when it comes to implementing the requirements of an international convention. And well, next steps, well, we have to keep making progress to try and comply with some requirements that are still pending today. Some of these activities and actions here, they were not only suspended or placed on hold. Oftentimes, we basically had to readjust many of the action plans that we had, given the new reality that we were faced with on account of the pandemic. We have to strengthen also our conversations between us from health and folks from the environment. We also have to get the involvement we also have to participate in the virtual meeting of COP4, which was also mentioned here, and we have to develop a national action plan for artisanal gold mining and small gold miners. So I just tried to give you a quick overview on the many things that we have been working with, and also about some of the progress that we have made in this area. I guess that's pretty much all I had to say, and I'll be available for whatever questions you may have. Dr. Daniela, thank you so very much for your presentation. I would like to say to you that it is indeed very interesting to see that the Ministry of Health and people who work at the Ministry of Health actually have, this, mindset and this concern about this issue. And I would like to offer you also the knowledge that we have gathered here and the research that we have conducted here, because after all, we too are civil servants, just as you, from the federal administration. And I would also like to say, well, first, and this is something that really caught my eye as you spoke about it, the need to keep this information flowing to everyone and getting people to report it properly. I'm a professor today, but I am also a civil servant in the municipal health care system, and I know how things are difficult there. And I'd like to say to you that training healthcare workers, that's truly of the essence, because I mean, and doctor, this was actually something that was mentioned here, but I don't know to what extent we are trained enough to think about alternatives, away from amalgam. So I think the Ministry of Health has a fundamental role to play at this. So again, Dr. Daniela, we're gonna wait for questions until later. If time allows, we will answer those questions. If time does not allow, we will send you those questions later. And I'd like to thank you for your participation. So let me thank you again for your comments. Let me now invite Dr. Nicole Aimé Rodriguez-José. She works at the General Coordination on Oral Health, Department of Family Health, Secretary of Primary Care from the Ministry of Health. And the floor is yours now, Nicole. 15 minutes for your talk. So thank you very much, Dr. Nicole, for being here with us. Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, no, thank you, by the way, for having invited me to be here today. And I can see Jeffrey there, and we were able, thanks to him, to, have this presence in at such an important meeting. Well, I have a truly short presentation here covering some of the actions that we have been implementing in our team. So let me try and share this presentation with you. Okay, so I've been introduced already. My name is Nicole. I'm a technical consultant at the Coordination of Oral Health. We work in the Department of Family Health, and we work more on the processes that oral health teams are engaged in, more specifically. And we work under the primary health care secretary. It was a secretary open in 2019, and it's a specific secretary in the Ministry of Health that looks specifically at actions connected to primary health care. So over here, I have a bit of an overview on our national policy for oral health. We call it a Smiley Brazil. It is a policy that all of us from Brazil should be proud of, because it is a policy that offers, oral health care to everyone. It is actually the largest free health care, oral care policy in the world. And this is something we should really be proud of as Brazilians. So this policy, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, it basically contains, it actually touches upon a number of different areas. So we have joint efforts done together with the health surveillance team, and this is why we were also involved in the development of the intersectorial plan for the implementation of the Minamata Convention concerning the use of dental amalgam. But this policy, which we call Smiley Brazil, contains a number of different actions and a number of different points at which oral care is provided. Maybe the most important, and the one that our team is most concerned with, is strengthening primary health care and oral health. And this involves a number of actions, such as water fluoridation, also campaigns to strengthen, actually to build the skills of people on how to brush their teeth, And this is also part of our school health program. Today, we count on 27,000 teams, oral health care teams, as a part of our family physician teams. It's actually a strategy that we have developed to cover the healthcare needs of everyone in the families that we are, for which we're responsible. We are also intensifying oral health care to pregnant individuals, since this is a fundamental group when it comes to passing advice to them on oral health care to them and to their babies as well. And in addition to these actions in the area of primary oral health care, we were also involved in a number of other coordinated efforts inside the Ministry of Health, working in conjunction with other offices and teams that work, for instance, with sugar, which is connected to caries, and a number of other actions as well in the area of family health and community health. So we have been strengthening our efforts in the area of oral health. In addition to that, we also have a support network made up by regional labs in which prosthetics are made. We have more than 3,000 of those working with us. And last but not least, we also have specialized care in oral health, which is basically represented by our centers of oral care, expert centers of oral care for higher complexity treatments. In addition to that, we also have 302 mobile dental clinics, which are basically there to serve populations that live in more isolated areas here in Brazil. And as you might wonder, a national policy for oral health, it's about public free access to oral care. It involves a number of different people. And today I'm going to talk a little about mercury, an account, mercury specifically coming from dental amalgam. But again, it is a much larger, much more encompassing policy. And we as Brazilians also have to play a role here so as to further strengthen it.
So this is a general overview of dental caries, which is mostly the main cause that we have been trying to fight and to make people more aware of the relevance of this disease. Many people still fail to acknowledge it as a chronic untransmittable disease, but it is. And the clinical sign is the dental caries in the dental cavity, but it involves many different factors, such as social factors, access to public health care, to hygiene products. It also involves the sugar consumption, which is a public health problem of the modern world. So all that will contribute for the development of the caries as a whole. So this is a simplified illustration of the dental caries and mainly the clinical signs of this chronic disease. In the initial stage, for people who actually have a high sugar intake, sometimes they manifest, they have the white lesions. And so at this stage, we can reinforce the self-care, we can educate them to improve oral hygiene and to use fluorine-based toothpastes. However, we know that Brazil, given its territorial dimension and social inequalities, a lot of the population is still deprived from hygiene products or even access to information of health. And so from then on, we start to have cavitated lesions, and despite we have 27,000 teams of oral health, at a national level, this is really not enough to cover the whole population. So those users, whenever they need restorative and rehabilitation treatment, they might have access to basic oral clinics, but not always will have oral surgeons as part of the team, of the family health team. We, from this field, we have been trying to promote the health prevention strategies so that this doesn't happen, or if it does happen, at least that it affects to reversible stages, and that the prevention can be done through minimally invasive techniques. And the minimally invasive dentistry is a sort of a new dentistry that is based on new dental materials. So we usually say that the population that is already affected by cavitated lesions, or rather that is affected by the disease, that should look for support in early stages of the disease, so that they they might have more conservative treatment. So this is a measure that is dedicated to promoting a minimally invasive dentistry focused on health promotion, and the restorative cases should be saved to those more severe cases. And here is the overview of restored, lost, or filled teeth. That is an index, and here in between 2003 and 2010, Brazil exhibited a reduction on caries prevalence, so which is quite positive, and basically due to the expansion of the Smile in Brazil program, we could see this very clear impact on the oral health of the Brazilian population. But we still see that there is a prevalence of patients who are affected by untreated caries lesions. And this is indeed a public health problem when we plan and when we revisit all the national policy, oral health national policy. So we hope to update this epidemiological data soon. Because of the pandemic, the survey that was supposed to be completed in 2020 is now happening throughout the year of 2021, but very soon we should have the updated versions in order to reprogram all the policies as a result of our all the actions as a result of our policies. And then the pandemic came that affected us, and also the dental services that were offered. And we can see the drastic reduction on the procedures. Procedures were reduced in something like 60%. So the scenario is far from favorable of a repressed demand of people who are unserved on their dental needs. And so therefore we might be faced with very negative circumstances, and lesions that could have been prevented will probably be open cavities, and that will need bigger fillings due to this suspension of the services for almost 2 years. And here we have the specific actions of the oral health program, and that was a result of the coordination in our, when we are indeed pretty focused on reducing the use of amalgam in Brazil, and our policy aims at reducing the incidence of caries. And we have been expanding the oral health coverage throughout the Brazilian territory. We also have been focusing on oral health education and the self-care concepts, and school attention, dental assistance to pregnant women, and we hope to provide all the oral health teams with protocols that will support and encourage minimally invasive dentistry. And still on some other components of the annex that aim at reducing the consumption of amalgam, we put together technical and scientific protocols and the restorative, atraumatic restorative technique that will also provide to the oral health teams. So the prohibition of the non-encapsulated amalgam is now in force and throughout the whole territory of Brazil. And obviously, the one thing we have to do is to instruct the team to do the proper disposal of the residues. And also, we've updated our information system on monitoring the procedures that are performed in the Brazilian population. So today, from 2020 onwards, we are able to visualize that the teams are doing composite, a glasionomer, or amalgam restorations. Those were the actions that were developed so far, but we are at your service by the General Coordination of Oral Health. And my last message is that we have been reinforcing the information that oral healthcare should be encouraged since a very early age so that major interventions are not needed. Thank you. And thank you for the organizing committee for the invite. Thank you, Dr. Nicole. It was very important to count on your presence, on your participation, and for addressing the questions. And we are also at your disposal for whatever is necessary from now onward. So we understand that it's a challenge that can't be faced by a single stakeholder. All of us have the challenge to maintain high quality oral health with access to all. Thank you very much for your clarifications. So now I would like to give the floor to Vicente de Paula da Silva, our state representative. His name is Vicentinho. He's got a degree in law. He's been a federal representative since 2003, and he is got a over 40-year experience in union actions, and he's going to talk to us about the policy to avoid mercury amalgam here in Brazil. You have 30 minutes, Mr. Representative. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are and who. It's a great pleasure and satisfaction to take part on this very important dialogue. And I've been attending since the very first moment, although I am taking part on my session at the parliament, but it's a remote voting system. So I did my best to pay attention to all the important messages that were being conveyed through this important event. I have post-graduation at Unicamp on labor economy. I'm a lawyer, and I also am part of the faculty of law school. And at the National Congress, we try to advocate the rights for workers, fighting against prejudice and discrimination, more proactive participation, more democratic policies, and a very intense advocacy towards the rule of law, democratic rule of law. And this is absolutely essential to our sorry, I think we his connection is dropping out. So so therefore I'd like to greet all of the participants, and in particular Professor Silvia Maria, and my special compliments to the directors, to Dr. Maria Isabel and Dr. Silvia for this initiative to dialogue about mercury amalgam from not only the dental perspective, but from the social and economic perspective, which is important to the whole society. My greetings to Dr. Charlie Brown, who's the president of the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry, Dr. Maria Isabel, who's the president of the same alliance, the Latin American chapter, and many other participants who are struggling here for the human rights, and as we discussed here, for the roe deer case and the negative substances. And we've taken part in many other seminars in the struggle against this aquatic cave that they intend to do, which is highly destructive to our environment. So congratulations, Jeffrey, for all your works. He is the coordinator of this campaign. And to Dr. Graham Hall, who's the technical assistant and counselor of this alliance. Dr. Daniela, congratulations to you as well for the important information that you conveyed on the work that's being developed by the Ministry of Health, the research work, prevention. I learned a lot, and I really would like to extend our dialogue when we hold public hearings. And Dr. Nicole, thank you, Dr. Nicole, for the thorough explanation about a smiling Brazil. Beautiful program. I actually learned more here now with you than when I had to cast my vote. So, well, we are actually going through two different moments. We are glad because we just voted the bill that will provide funds to the COVID victims and the mental health, nurses, children, and other people. But also, we are very concerned because they should vote the a constitutional amendment proposal of the Brazilian Constitution that basically changes the role of the state, and in a very perverse manner that would undermine and sap the stability of the job positions of civil servants. And that will also undermine the stability of public services. And from what Dr. Daniel and Dr. Nicole said, this can be threatened in face of the lack of certainty that will be seen by the state and by the great economic groups nationally and internationally. Is something very, very severe, but here we are to struggle until the end. As you know well, ladies and gentlemen, part of our attributions here as state representatives is in, setting up public policies and helping in the legislating, and it's to discuss and about international agreements as it happens with international conventions, and among others the Stockholm Convention on Pollutants, and more recently the Minamata Convention on Mercury. So those agreements, after having been signed off and ratified by the Parliament, are part of our legal national framework. And then the executive power issues a national decree that actually puts this into effect. So the Minamata Convention was published in 2017, was promulgated by the decree 9470 in order to take effect. And this is basically what we are dealing here today, about the international agreements that were signed by Brazil, and in particular the Minamata Convention, and that in its first section prescribes that the main goal is to avoid the release of mercury and mercury compounds, mercury-based compounds. And Dr. Daniela knows also that very important work has been done with the asbestos, for instance. This is a struggle that was started some time ago and hasn't stopped yet. That convention was put together and approved after many experts from many parts of the world have investigated and verified sanitary concerns, especially in the developing countries. Those concerns are a result of mercury exposure by vulnerable and underserved populations and the future generations in particular. And the vulnerabilities of the Arctic systems and the indigenous populations, given the bio multiplication of mercury, and that basically shows that there's a broader concern with indigenous populations that go beyond the mercury itself, and we know the consequences down the road. And also we have consequences that have come from the so-called Minamata disease, which are those consequences caused by the mercury poisoning. Therefore, we need to manage that and to prevent such events. Many researchers that were discussing and tackling aspects like the ones we saw here in the seminar today, they reveal how threatening and harming mercury can have, even if contained in the amalgam, to not only dental professionals, but all the people affected by it. Amalgam is comprised of a set of materials that form an alloy that is formed in 50% of elementary mercury. And we know that mercury is a highly threatening and poisoning material. And having this international convention that counts on the engagement of over 120 countries to have the immediate control and the full elimination within short and medium term. Mercury is particularly toxic to children's development and is responsible for irreversible lesions and damages to many systems like the renal system, nervous system, immune system, and so on. This metal, which is not essential at all to the body, whenever the body is exposed to it, it can be transferred from mother to child during pregnancy, and crosses through the placentary barrier, and the concentration might be higher or lower depending on the amalgam amount, on genes, and other activities such as parafunction and teeth grinding and bruxism. And a prolonged exposure might represent a bigger harm to the health of underserved people, and that might have difficulty, and people who are in underserved conditions, who might have difficulties in secreting and this substance. And the FDA, as we know, recommends strict or severe restrictions against the use of amalgam. And the European Union has adopted and banned the use of amalgam in children, breastfeeding, and other populations. So, in the beginning of this year, myself and some colleagues, we were presented with a letter that was addressed to us by the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry, and that letter contained many important information and basically required us to take action in order to ban the use of toxic mercury in dental restorations. Myself and my colleagues have immediately supported this initiative, and the Dental Parliamentary Front, of which I am a member, has welcomed and embraced this demand, and we are putting together a bill that will advocate for not only the workers' health, environmental health, and other commitments that were taken by Brazil in the Minamata Convention. The bill counted on the support of professionals highly experienced professionals such as Dr. Cecilia Tavares, Jeffer Castelo Branco, Rafaela Rodriguez, and members of the Center for Studies, Research and Outreach for Environmental Research from the Federal University of São Paulo and the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. This bill entails very state-of-the-art prescriptions that basically sets the technical, commercial, and environmental limits and measures that will prevent the contamination of professionals and promoting this in both in economic, social, and personal arenas. And the banning of mercury in the amalgam, this will be done at a national basis, and it will immediately avoid amalgam to be used in pregnant women and reproductive age women and children and adolescents, people with renal or nervous diseases, and in people with previous diagnosis of mercury poisoning. And two, establishing a 3-year deadline so that the amalgam restorations are fully banned from dental procedures. Number 3, sets a deadline so that professionals might put together a gradual reduction plan for the use of amalgam, and also presents strategies to dispose of residues. And I will commit to together with my colleagues, we are committed to doing the best of our efforts in order for this bill to move forward. And we, if we don't have a good surveillance and internal engagement, this bill can be shelved. So count on the Brazilian Parliament. Thank you very much, Mr. Representative, and Mr. Congressman, and we have been sending our request to many politicians of the country, and you were one of the few who've replied to us with the attention that it deserves. And so thank you so very much. And obviously your participation is fundamental for the success of this bill. And we civil servants, we are severely affected by this. I'm a civil servant, not only of the municipality, but of the federal government. And I've always been proud of my position, pretty much as Dr. Daniela and Dr. Nicole might be by the way they've tackled the topic and due to their deep commitment to the issue. So thank you very much for your words, Mr. Congressman, and we are here at your service with the Federal University of São Paulo and with our research groups. Our apologies for being such a strict timekeeper, but it's really important that we close our activity with an attempt to produce a recommendation here together with other groups of civil society. So now we are going to start with the third session of our meeting today with the participation of some members of the audience and so that we can hear them. The first person is Dr. Raquel Sembranelli. She's a biologist. And please, Dr. Raquel, if you could try to summarize it in 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. First off, let me start by congratulating the organizers of this meeting. We've had a lot of really interesting topics discussed here today. I am a dentist, by the way. I hail from the countryside of the city of São Paulo. And we dentists, we have been actually facing an uphill battle on this topic because we end up, because the trouble resides precisely within, our class of workers, we dentists, because we who try to fight for mercury-free dentistry, we end up being, in a way, branded, but as people who are trying to feed a fad. So we face a lot of resistance from other dentists. And when I saw this meeting, I think I can speak on behalf of a couple of other colleagues. We were actually eager to see a meeting such as this one, a meeting that was organized by a university, by people involved in research, which could also, talk to us about the flip side of that coin, because inside dentistry, I have to say it's a very controversial topic, a topic in which we have a lot of hard time, getting these discussions in progress. And Dr. Madi was one of my teachers at school. I learned a lot from her, and we really have to add our strength to make it happen, because I think that the biggest challenge here, and I'm talking about us dentists, is to actually get people to replace mercury amalgam. Dr. Cole spoke very well about prevention, and this is really the heart of the matter, I think. But in addition to prevention, you also have to see, and take care of people who have, this amalgam in their mouths, people who are now sick. And the time and when you remove it is actually a most critical moment, because that's when, healthcare teams will be contaminated, patients and the environment as well. So you really have to discuss this topic, to maybe establish a protocol that is actually, feasible and viable for the entire public healthcare system. And maybe the key to all of that is information. Because we see, even inside large universities, institutions such as universities, you still have professors speaking in favor of mercury amalgam. I think that information has to make it to the students, and those students are learning the wrong thing, you see, still today. So we have to work strongly with education so that good quality information reaches students ultimately, so that we can then, write a different history for ourselves from now on. Thank you very much. Did I stay within my 3 minutes? Yes, you did. Perfect job, by the way. But time is limited here. But soon after but after this meeting, we will still be around, right, in our center here, and we will certainly have to, keep on engaging on this topic. I'd like to invite Dr. Magda Siqueira, a dentist as well, and you also have 3 minutes for your comments, Dr. Magda. Well, let me start by greeting everyone and congratulating your staff, every one of the speakers who were here, for their brilliant presentations on such a controversial topic, which is mercury poisoning. I am a surgeon and dentist, and I found that I had been poisoned by mercury when I had breast cancer. So this is an important discussion, and I believe that, pretty much of everything that was said here, and Dr. Raquel spoke very well about it, we dentists from Brazil right now do not have the information of how to remove mercury amalgam. So this is why I looked at, some documents from, I was certified on how to safely remove amalgam. However, this is a very expensive certification process. Today, I have as a goal in my life to convey that knowledge to others. So I am delivering actually a training course on that, in which I transfer that information over to others. And just so we know, we don't even had mercury separators available in Brazil, so that we could have those in our offices, so as not to pollute the environment. Today, I'm working in the city of São Carlos, and the big challenge is, what should I do with this mercury waste, right, that I remove? And I collect everything that I use. And if you work with dentistry, by the way, you know that you have to isolate everything. And I got in touch with the local health surveillance authorities, and they asked that I save this in my office, because today in the city of São Carlos, we don't have a company to recycle mercury. And I'm doing that because I was given information. But what most dentists do, people without information, they basically throw it away and have it incinerated. So I'm very thankful for this opportunity to be here to talk to you. Let me also greet Dr. Martha, Dr. Olympio Pinto as well, everyone from the American Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, Dr. Rodrigo Ventisicki, Dr. Elizetti, and every one of the students who've done the program with me on ozone therapy and on safe amalgam removal, in which I and Dr. Celso Sakakura now have the challenge of teaching people. I'm also a civil servant, by the way, working with the municipality of São Carlos. And I asked actually that the Health Surveillance Authority were here today watching this seminar. They, apparently they were unable, but I'll still pass on to them a summary of what was discussed here. Congratulations, Mr. Congressman, for the Bill of Law, and I hope that we can convey that knowledge over to more people. So congratulations, seriously, everyone, and specifically the staff at the Federal University of São Paulo, and the research that you're doing. If I can do anything to help, I'd be more than glad to do that. Thank you very much. Dr. Magda, I am honored to have you here today, and I have to say to you that, I mean, those of us who are teachers and professors, we know the challenge it is. You know, to teach in this country, to teach in this society with the conditions that we have here, the pandemic, it's a lot of challenges, you're right. And I have to say that our seminar will also be available on YouTube later. And because we told everyone that it'd be recorded and made available publicly. So you can please and do use it. And this is actually what universities are supposed to do, right? We have to make sure that the information that we discuss here be published. So thank you very much again for your words and for your support. So let me now invite Mr. Valdivino dos Santos Rocha, representing the Association of Individuals Exposed and Poisoned by Metallic Mercury. He has been working for decades to defend workers exposed to mercury in their workplaces. So, Mr. Valdivino, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good evening. And instead of, greeting everyone, by their individual names, I have to say here to Dr. Nicole and Dr. Oh man, I forgot her name. She works at the Secretary of Health. Daniela, yes, thank you for helping me there. So I would like to say that, I mean, what I have to say here is kind of a different thing, but I do not consider you guys as my opponents. No, it's actually quite the opposite. We are all on the same side, and we are all courageous people who are here to, take it up to the man, if you will, and to side with workers. So my name is Valdivino, and I'm a member of the Association of Individuals Exposed and Poisoned by Mercury, exposed to and poisoned by mercury. This association was opened in 1996. And since then, our association has tried and struggled to defend shop floor workers because it is very difficult, the situation they live in. Those guys get sick and they're basically left to their own resources. So there is no policy actually to try and see what they need. The policy that we have in place is of basically disregarding utterly, their complaints, their claims, and their diseases. But anyhow, in the struggle that we have been going through now for numerous years, we got better organized. Our association got organized, and Philips, which is a really big company here in Brazil, we got organized, and 230 workers ended up benefiting from the efforts made by everyone involved in it, because we had lots of technical personnel involved here as well, and many other people who did a lot to help these workers, and they eventually helped them for real. And we were able then to help 230 workers from Philips, and we now have also we've been discussing with another company, OSRAM, more than 300 workers exposed to mercury. And in the end, we had 271 workers in the end of this lawsuit that we filed against OSRAM. So out of these workers, we had 171 who were diagnosed with mercury poisoning, and a few more who were not diagnosed with it, but some of them were diagnosed with mercury poisoning at the university hospital. So sometimes you are in a difficult situation because at the university hospital, we also have someone who works a lot on occupational health. And some people, were diagnosed with mercury poisoning as they were examined by the physician at the university hospital. But again, I'm not going to talk about those discrepancies. What I mean to say is that we are now also engaging another company, facing again the same uphill battle. And what I would like to say to you is, we have so many workers today, and it is very clear that those guys are ill. They have been diagnosed, and oftentimes, companies recognize it, and the courts also recognized it, and they eventually got paid indemnification because of that. Big number of workers. And we also have a system called SINAN, system held by the Ministry of Health, that is used to report cases of mercury poisoning. And before the pandemic, we had 16 cases of mercury poisoning in Brazil. Only that, people who were poisoned by mercury, only 16. And it's a really, really small number. And we decided to talk then to the Secretary of Health about it. It's actually one of the divisions in the Secretary of Health, and we started, discussing with them why this number was so low. And the number eventually went up to 40. Before the pandemic, it went up to 40, and then we had the pandemic. And since then, we haven't been, meeting them, that often, obviously. But we still have a big number of workers who were diagnosed with mercury poisoning. It's proven. So in court, there you have it, all of those medical reports proving that they were poisoned by mercury. And I'd like to take the time here to ask you, and I'm quite sure that I will have the support of the folks who are here, and Dr. Daniela as well. If you could please help us to improve levels of reporting, because I think that, following up on those cases, because it is a chronic disease. Obviously, so there's no treatment for it, but you can still follow up on those individuals with mercury poisoning. And reporting to me is just as important as the follow-up that will be ultimately delivered to these workers, because whether you have something recorded in the system of the Ministry of Health, which will later on also be used for purposes of research, right? Because we can't simply allow that to be forgotten. In the future, I will obviously die, and then if you haven't captured that information, it will all die with us. So we have to report it. I don't want to die actually before reporting has been fixed here in Brazil, reporting of mercury poisoning cases. And I would like to ask Dr. Daniele for your help so that we can get those cases properly reported and recorded in your systems. And in the meantime, I'll keep on with my work. I'd also like to thank Mr. Congressman Vicentino, a person who's also done quite a bit in this area. And I'd like to thank you then, Congressman, for your help. You are a person that I consider as a true partner. And if we ever need you, I know that you will be there for us. And let me also thank the other folks who are here. Everyone here, very important, people with technical knowledge, very important, because workers alone, without the support of people with knowledge, we simply, can't get it done by ourselves. And something else that I really have to say here has to do with, the follow-up that has to be, follow-up care that has to be provided to these workers. If you look at the cases and the lawsuits that we filed against big companies and the ones in which we were successful, we asked that, some of that money also be used to, help healthcare systems and clinics, because I know that healthcare is somewhat precarious here. And we sent 4 million reais to a healthcare clinic, which they bought, they bought 4 million reais worth of equipment. It's quite a bit of money, right? And this is what, we were left with. It was this physician who took care of us. She ended up dying. The physician who was taking care of us, they got her out of there, and they have her in the rehab service instead. And they took us to this rehab center. But guys, look, we are, I mean, in a very tough situation, because mercury poisoning, it doesn't require rehab. So they actually removed us from a place in which we had more, technical conditions to be offered proper care, and they basically, sidelined us into this rehabilitation service, which we know. I mean, it's not the right thing, and it's not the right thing to do, because when you get sick, I mean, rehabilitating a worker, a sick worker, is very difficult when you have a chronic condition as we know it, and there's no way you can actually go back to working. In my case, we have people here with technical knowledge who know that, and I've had no kidney disease now for a long time. Last time I went to the doctor was a year ago, and the doctor said to me that I had 18% of my kidney working. And I didn't go back because I'm afraid of that, because I'm feeling well. I'm living here. And this doctor said that only 18% of my kidneys are working. So why should I go back there? And because he said, look, if this decreases anymore, you're going to have to go into hemodialysis. I mean, I'm still alive. I haven't been back there yet. I don't know exactly until when I'll be alive, but for as long as I'm alive, I will fight so that this doesn't happen to other people who are also exposed to mercury. I think that, well, not sure if I went over my time, but anyhow, thank you very much for letting me speak here. And I would like to thank everyone for your kind attention. And I count on your help too, guys, because this is really important. I didn't say anything about that, but Jeffer, I mean, you're a true warrior, and we are together in it. You know it, and I can count on him, and I can also count on a lot of other people that he knows for sure. And because I truly believe in it. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Mr. Valdivino, of course, I mean, you did exceed your time, but until now we were dealing with technical issues, and you introduced us to the human dimension of this, which is your experience. And here is what we are here for. We from the university, we from our center, that's what we are here for. And I'm pretty certain that all the presents here are really touched by your testimony. And this is not only a cause, but rather fighting for your life and the lives of others who depend on you. So I'm really proud for having you here with us, raising this flag and available to engage in this cause. And a pandemic, I know, has been a pretty frightening experience to some, but thank you so very much for your words and your account. You have no idea how much that contributes to forming new professionals and to strengthen our cause. And whatever we can do for you, count on us. And Jeff is our contact, and we need to take care of everybody. So now I'd like to give the floor to Mari Polacchini, who's the engineer representing the environmentalist front of Baixada Santista, and who will present present us with the declaration and will give us the recommendations on the future of the ban against mercury and dental mercury.
Pronto.
There we go.
Eu consegui desbloquear meu vídeo? Eu não estou me vendo?
So I cannot see myself. I hope you can see me.
Boa noite, também é muito bom te ver a todos aqui.
Good evening. It's very good to see you, Sylvia, and all the other participants. On behalf of the environmentalist front of Baixada Santista, I have to admit that I'm highly, touched by everything that I heard here today as a civil society advocate. And again, we find out how exposed we are to all sorts of chemical poisoning that will not only affect our health, but the environmental health and the source sometimes is in places that we could barely imagine that would be affecting us so dramatically. So all this knowledge that was shared with us about dental amalgam. That is another additional element that is part of our daily life, but has severe consequences to our lives. And many of those injuries are irreversible. And that actually led us to a very effective action, which was the Santos Declaration on the dental amalgam. So the underassigned require the federal government to take immediate measures to restrict the use of dental amalgam to vulnerable populations to mercury exposure, and that should not exceed 3 years in removing the amalgam fillings in all the patients from the private and public services for the reasons below. Dental amalgam is comprised of materials that form an alloy that is comprised of 50% of elementary mercury. Mercury is one of the more hazardous materials of world interest. It's particularly toxic to the brain development of children. It can cause kidney, renal injury, and neural injury in the central nervous system. It's persistent and accumulates in the bodies of human beings and animals. And this is transmitted from mother to child through the placental barrier. And even if legal measures are taken, the dental mercury is inevitably released to the environment. The mercury that has been used worldwide can be released from the dental amalgam. So approximately 20 to 40% of all the mercury release is bioavailable by dental amalgam. So it's either released in the air, surface waters, or disposed as solid waste, or released in underground water. So since the use of mercury in batteries, lamps, thermometers, or other industrial-based processes has been regulated, the amalgam is actually responsible for a great part of the intentional use. So mercury released to the atmosphere throughout the world by human action, especially in gold mining and coal plants. Once released, it's dispersed, it actually crosses barriers and contributes to global contamination. And nowadays, the mercury levels in the atmosphere are 5 times higher than natural levels. Once mercury is elementary to enters or penetrates in water bodies, bacteria can transform it in metamercury that it's highly toxic and accumulates in fish and fish products and other animals that have a fish-based diet. And the standards have been exceeded in many places where surface water has been monitored. Almost all the fish have been exceeding the limits of environmental quality in the environments researched. Fish and fish-based products are also the source of human poisoning. And according to a study that was conducted in the European Union in 2012, 1 at every 3 newborns in Europe contain elevated levels of mercury associated to the loss of cognition. And because of those concerns, 128 countries have negotiated an international treaty that is legally binding, of which Brazil is one of the parties, which is the Minamata Mercury Convention that was approved in 2013 and took effect in August 2017. That convention requires that every nation will eliminate all sorts of use and reduce the mercury releases, including the dental amalgam. Minamata's convention states and declares that countries are fully aware of the health-related problems, and in particular, caused to vulnerable populations in developing countries that stem from mercury exposure, especially in women, children, and through them and their offspring. The American Food and Drug Administration has issued a recommendation against the use of amalgam in pregnant women, women in reproductive age, breastfeeding, children, especially those who are younger than 6. So people with pre-existing neurologic conditions, people with renal failure, people with known sensitivity, increased sensitivity to mercury or other amalgam compounds. And in 2018, the European Union has adopted the ban of the use of amalgam in children, breastfeeding, and pregnant women. And the existing countries should develop strategies to the continuous reduction of the use and for the full elimination of dental amalgam that is technically and economically feasible before 2030. And given the high cost caused by the mercury emissions, amalgam is currently more expensive than most of the other dental materials available today, especially when taking into account the environmental costs. The continuous use or exposure to dental amalgam might hinder and potentially reduce the efficacy of the Minamata Convention and other laws of environmental and public health protection. And strong reasons after which the use of amalgam should be strictly forbidden, and to set a deadline for this to be banned in dentistry to the whole population. Amalgam restorations slowly release mercury vapors, and that obviously depends on the age and quality of the restorations, as well as the contact with other metals and parafunctions like grinding teeth, brushing your teeth, or drinking hot beverages. And despite this might not be detrimental to many people, prolonged exposures might represent threat to vulnerable population and to those with impaired renal secretion, and also due to the possibility of accumulation and the possibility of transforming it into more toxic compounds. The concerns of the additional and cumulative mercury accumulation from other sources, like from fish or other marine species, with cumulative effects of different exposure. Alternative dental restorative materials free of mercury are reliable and available, as proven by the growing number of countries around the world who either reduced or fully eliminated the use of amalgam in dentistry. Norway, Sweden, and Moldavia have forbidden amalgam fillings, no exceptions. Compound-based restorations in glass ionomer allow more conservative techniques and the longer survival of the teeth after minimally invasive dentistry. Composite resins, they will last as long as or even longer than amalgam. And the modern alternative dental materials, amalgam-free or mercury-free, are available and are affordable. Cyprus, Malta, Ireland, the Netherlands have been doing refund for alternative materials, and they are absolutely equivalent to amalgam. The low-income users are more subject to exposure, since public healthcare will offer amalgam as part of the dental solutions. And universities and faculties should consistently ban mercury from the professional education, and should form and educate dentists towards avoiding its use or being able to safely remove it. And insurance companies should eliminate amalgam in their contracts. An interview that was carried out in the European Union in 2014 has revealed that 86% of people are favorable to the elimination of dental amalgam. And for this reason, we at the Brazilian government, at the 3 levels are observing the precautionary principle. The federal constitution and the standards in effect are here restricting the use in vulnerable populations like pregnant women, women in reproductive age, breastfeeding women and other babies and children, especially the ones younger than 14, people with pre-existing neurologic conditions, people with renal failure, people with known increased sensitivity to mercury or other components of the dental amalgam, should establish rules that will guarantee the ban of dental amalgam in both new and old policies, and should extend this to the whole population before 2025. So we can see here with the signature of all the other entities that Silvia has mentioned. And as we saw here, and through this manifest, we are asking for your support so that we are able to meet the requirements of Minamata Convention and to eliminate the use of dental amalgam from our dentistry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, then, Mari. Thank you for your support. We know of your history, of your track record in this area. We know what you mean to the environmental movement here in our region. We profoundly respect you and everything that you have built during your career. To us, it is very important to have you as the messenger, the person carrying this document. It is a document that aims at providing us with additional support. It's a document that looks at cooperation, and everything that we have said here, in my view, also touches upon those same goals. So we have the link here for you, and please sign this document. It will be sent to our politicians, same way as we sent a draft proposal so that this topic is discussed. This is an urgent matter because in November, we're going to have the 4th COP meeting, Conference of the Parties, and it is urgent that this be discussed by the politicians in Congress here in Brazil. So, Mari, thank you very much. Let me yield the floor very quickly to Silas Bezerra. Are you there with us? If you could please hear your comments, and you have 3 minutes. Can I do that? Yes, by all means. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Silas Bezerra. I'm the chairperson of an environmental NGO here in the Baixada Santista. I also work at the State Council for the Environment. And I would like to thank you actually for having organized this meeting in which we had a lot of important information and specifically in areas pertaining to the environment and health. And because, those two topics speak of our lives, really enlightening presentations on the use of amalgam, and something that should be prevented and banned altogether. So I have to therefore state that I support this initiative, and I support the initiative to ban the use of amalgam in dental practices, because today we have other ways to get that same job done, and I truly hope that this information be disseminated to every dentist and healthcare worker, because this really produces impacts not only to our health, but also to our environment. And so we are in favor of this case. And actually, my husband is a dentist. He hasn't used amalgam for a number of years, and he's been here with us, supporting us. I have to congratulate you, and do count on us, members of civil society and civil society organizations, and we will be there to support you. So no to amalgam and yes to other alternative products so that we can preserve our health and our environment. So thank you very much, and count on us. Thank you very much, Silas. You were there with us. And in spite of the glitches that you've had there with technology, but I like nonetheless to thank you for your kind words. And I have to say that it's really nice to count on you. And the document presented by civil society will actually have the support of every one of your participants here. And we are asking you, therefore, to sign this declaration so that we can further share this idea. And we also have Valdivino, a living witness, and who will be alive for a very long time, okay, Mr. Valdivino, so that we can keep on with the struggle. And this document here, the one cited by Mari and read by her, is a fundamental document so that we can keep up with the work that we have ahead of us. And with that, I would like again to express gratitude to everyone who's been working here with us. And I also have to say that we have a few questions that were left behind, and we are going to try and provide answers to those questions. But two of them here, which really caught my eye, are, well, first, what are the interests that reside behind the maintenance of mercury amalgam? We have to know very clearly what this means for our society, the contradictions that it might entail as well. And I would also like to say to Dr. Daniela and Dr. Nicole as well, that we have had a big concern here with the difficulty of, not having, because every action that we work, be it in the streets or be in dental practices or mobile dental clinics, and everything that we have seen here in our region, there's always a huge line of people waiting for dental care, for oral care. So we have to see how this can be addressed. Now, if we have to train more people, or if we have to get more people involved in it, because we have to have our public healthcare system, we have to make it work. We have a lot to learn, obviously, and we have a lot to build. And I would like to now yield to basically go on to the closing part of our meeting. And I have to make it very clear that every question that was sent to us will be answered through our communication channels. And we are very much available to engage in future conversations about it. But let me now yield the floor to Dr. Charles Brown so that we can close our meeting. And I do that by actually, and before I go there, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and also for the spirit of collaboration and cooperation that helps us all. So, Mr. Brown, the floor is yours for your closing remarks.
Muito obrigado. Deputado Vincencio Tencio
Thank you very much.
Advocado.
Congressman Vicentinho, thank you very much.
Também soy advogado. I am just wonderful to work with you. It would be an honor to work in Brasilia with you. Someday I want to come south. None of us can travel anywhere, but my goal is to get to Brazil as soon as I can. Valdivino, you're a man of great courage, of great accomplishment, Valdivino, and I hope I pronounced your name right, but I just very much was moved by your fight for the workers who are exposed to mercury. Mercury is dangerous, not just because it's toxic, it's the most vaporous of the heavy metals. It's a dangerous workplace, dental offices and so on. So I want to salute the dentists who stand up. Several of you spoke, two of you at least, who stand up for mercury-free dentistry. Of course, it's not easy. I started in the US not running an NGO, working in an NGO, but as the lawyer for dentists who stood up for their rights and said, I'm going to be a mercury-free dentist. They needed lawyers. It was too bad. They should not have needed a lawyer, but the pressures on them were terrible. That has changed. It's changing in Brazil too, because more and more dentists are mercury-free. You are the pioneers. You dentists who are mercury-free are the pioneers. You were first. You're ahead of everyone. People will catch up with you. The dentists will realize it, but it will take a little while. Marie, as an NGO leader, what your work is great. This Declaration of Santos is the tool for civil society. It's the way civil society can step up and have an impact. How do I know that? Because we've done it over and over. We started with the Abuja Declaration for Africa in Abuja, the capital city. By the way, Abuja has something in common with Brasilia. It was a created capital. Just it did not exist. Nigeria said, let's create a capital, like Washington, like Brasilia, and like Abuja. And in Abuja, just 7 or 8 of us in a small hotel room wrote the Abuja Declaration. It was so popular in Africa, we've repeated it over and over again all over the world. And most recently, the Bonn, B-O-N-N, a city in Germany, for the German Declaration, the action there. We, in the United States and also Estados Unidos, we did the Chicago Declaration, and it had huge impact. Before the Chicago Declaration, the government did not think we were important. No importante for los ONG. But then we became important with the Chicago Declaration. As you sign on groups, and you've done it, Jeffer, Marie, you've done it. Groups, NGOs have signed on. You will show Brasilia, you will show the ministries, you will show the congressmen. We don't need to show Deputy Vincentino, but we need to show others that you are important, that this cause is important. And the Santos Declaration will do that. In fact, Poland is going to do that. Very soon you're going to see one from Poland. What the Santos Declaration will do for not just Sao Paulo state, of course, but for all 26 states and for the federal government. So you have found routes to success here, political success, a science success. The science is with us, the public is with us, and you are going to change Brazil. And what does that mean to workers, Valentino? It means a less toxic workplace. What does it mean to the American Indians, the native people in the Amazon? It means a less toxic Amazon for them to live in. What does it mean for the consumers? It means better dentistry, because the dentistry is going to be mercury-free. It's higher quality. And of course, it's non-toxic. For the dental workers, it means a workplace free of mercury. For the great Universidade de Sao Paulo, it means you are the pioneer. Your university, Sylvia, you have stepped up as the federal university, stepping forward on the moral reasons, science reasons, combining health and environment. This is a tribute to the University of Sao Paulo that you've stepped up, hosted this, and said, we will lead from the academic side because we need the academicians. We need the professors. Daniela, we really appreciate the health ministry. I can tell you in the United States, it took years. It took years for us to convince the health ministry, the Food and Drug Administration to get interested. Here in a matter of months, you've stepped forward, Daniela, and the other part of people from the Ministry of Health. So I just see such fast action. Chemistry, you're bringing all these people together. Jeffer, it's amazing. Maria and Jeffer have worked together for years, but I just met Jeffer earlier this year and I'm astounded how fast. And of course, I can't even meet him in person yet. None of you, but I hope to. So I just say congratulations. It's fantastic work and on to victory in Brazil.
Thank you so very much, everyone. And I have to thank you again and the folks who were here supporting us during this meeting. And I was honored, to be here with you guys, and we will certainly meet soon. We're completely available. Our contact info is there for you to see. Good evening from Brazil. Good evening, everyone. And we are now officially closing our meeting. Thank you so very much.
Boa noite. Muito bom.